And now, round 3. Take it away. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks. All right, I have to get us back to our slide deck to make sure.
There's things that we need to do.
Okay.
All the
there
things.
it is. All right,
There it
so
is.
some logistics first. We have a couple business items we have to take care of. The first one is the Padlet. Rachel and I spent some time during dinner. Dinner? Why did I say dinner? Lunch?
Foreshadowing?
Because that's the next question. Where do we go for dinner
Yeah,
after
we're
this?
going to need recommendations for dinner.
We need
That's
recommendations. Put them in the Padlet. But we checked the Padlet. There's a handful of questions there. But we're feeling like maybe the best way to address those questions is to answer them in the Padlet. So again, there's a evergreen answer there rather than us sort of read through them, answer them here, and then they're gone. We will type them in the Padlet. Is that fair for everyone? The next thing we want to do is we wanted to invite you to be on the podcast. Who wants to be on the Talking with Ted podcast?
Woo!
And the way we thought we would do that is a quick introduction to one of the episodes. So we were wondering if the people here in the room wouldn't mind doing a quick little video that just says,
You're listening to Talking with Tech.
you're listening to Talking with Tech.
And we're going to record it. And we're going to
Cool.
take a selfie. We're going to be in it.
Quick selfie.
It's going to be a panorama. You guys have to be super loud so we can all hear you.
Yeah, I'm going to do this.
All right. But make sure I'm in it.
Well, I'm going to end with you.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, we've got it, guys.
Got it?
We've done the run-through.
This has to be really loud the first time, right?
Yeah, like pack a punch with what you're saying. You're listening to Talking with Tech.
Did you want one practice? Quick.
All right. You're listening to Talking with Tech.
Okay, on 3.
Nailed it.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
You're listening to Talking with Tech.
Nailed it. Great job, guys. All right.
We'll
now,
put that on in the front of an episode, and they'd be like, that was us.
And then we'll talk about it. We'll be like, we went to Montana. It was amazing.
Any other logistical things? Padlet? That's it, I think.
One thing I'll add about the Padlet, I know I've been like teasing all these things. I'm like, oh, I have this whole Padlet about pegs, and I have this awesome YouTube video about lamp words for life. I will add those after the fact to the Padlet. I'm not able to remember my Padlet password, so once I'm in front of my computer, I will then add those resources. So go back to the Padlet and check it. I promise I will add those 2 things. All right, we solid?
We're good.
All right, let's roll. We have a lot of content that we're not going to be able to go over today. We've skipped some slides. Feel free to go through them. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough time to share all the awesome things. When we were talking about motor planning, though, I wanted to make sure that we went over these few slides because I feel like it's the kind of #1 thing I see when I'm thinking about, an AAC system. And oftentimes I'm working with families that have already been introduced to AAC, and they come to me because they're like, it's not working, or like, I don't know why they're not using it. Thank you for the toggle.
I'll do that so you don't lose your thing.
Okay, so when we're starting off with an AAC user, whether that's a young child or they're older, oftentimes I'm seeing a system that looks like this. Is this familiar to you guys? You're like, yeah, many of the individuals I'm working with perhaps have a system like this.
It's 5x3 grid with I in the top and more down in the bottom right, right?
Yes, so it's big icons, not a lot of words on the screen, right? So I feel like what happens is we start with a grid size like this because we're like, well, we're just going to start with a few words and not overwhelm them. And really what that means is not overwhelm the adults that are working around them, right? Because oftentimes my students aren't overwhelmed. It's the adults that are overwhelmed. So, with good intention, we start with a system like this. But the problem is once our, amazing instruction around AAC happens, our students or individuals that we're working with start learning these words, right? But then we're like, but we need more words. This isn't enough words. We talked about core language. We talked about all the words that we need our individuals with AAC to have access to. So when I'm thinking about assessment, and we're going to talk all about assessment in just a little bit, I'm trying to figure out how I can design with the end in mind. So this is a system that, a 3-year-old can use, but also a 33-year-old. And so if we can think about the end game for an AAC user, then we can reverse engineer what we're setting up. So oftentimes, again, we're seeing systems like this. If I were to then go to a system that had maybe 25 words or 45 words, what we're doing when we switch from a different grid size is we've lost hours and hours of learned motor plans. So all of that amazing work that you guys all did, teaching where these words are, the moment we shift to a larger grid size or smaller buttons, we lose all that motor planning. And so not to say there's not a time and a place for a system like this, but really I'm looking at a system like this only if there's access issues, only if the individual doesn't have the ability to isolate an index point and they need larger icons, larger buttons. But that's not the case. I'm oftentimes seeing a lot of students with autism coming, and a really good question to ask during an assessment is, how does your child or how does this individual navigate a smartphone or an iPad? Can they get to YouTube? And like 9 times out of 10, families are like, they can navigate it better than I can. Like they found their favorite YouTube video. They can go on Spotify and find their favorite song. And so what that tells us is that they have no issue with fine motor. Like they have no issue isolating an index point for YouTube and finding that. So really, we don't need a system like this. And again, there's not enough words. There's tons and tons of navigating. The more navigating you have to do on an AAC system, the more fatiguing it gets. If you have to do 6 touches to get into a very specific folder because you don't have a lot of real estate on the home screen, then you're just making AAC harder. You're making communication harder, where AAC in and of itself is already challenging, right? We have to add this extra layer of modeling. We have to add this extra layer of navigation for the motor planning. So we need to make it easier for kids. They're more likely to do it for us. So starting out with a system like this really should only happen if you have a student with fine motor issues or you're trying to build up access. And so this feels a little overwhelming maybe to some, and especially if you're working with early intervention or a 3-year-old, but we can use a masking strategy. So this way it ensures that we're not losing the motor planning. Systematically over time, as vocabulary builds, we can keep revealing more vocabulary. So a system like this allows for that motor planning. We eventually will get to something like this, right? We'll get to the full system, and that's the important kind of concept I want to teach you guys, because I'd say 9 times out of 10 when families come to me, I'm like, why was this the grid size? Why are we only have 25, or why do we only have 9? And it feels random for that reason. And I think it's because, again, we're starting off slow and we're starting off with not a lot of words because we're trying to, really what we're doing is like we're putting limits on our students. Totally understand using a masking strategy. I use strategies like this all the time. But it's really important to maintain the motor plans because, again, hours and hours of practice went into learning those initial motor plans. If we end up changing them, then we start from literally ground zero.
All right, I have a question for the room.
Yes.
Right? Can you go back to the previous slide?
I know what question you're going to ask.
This slide has 77-ish icons on it, right? And then Rachel, if you go to the next slide, also has 77 spaces on it, but some of them are blocked off, right? So you are going in to see a student for the very first time or a person for the very first time, and you're going to decide to show them something. Which do you start with? You only get to dance with your right foot first or your left foot first. Which way are you going to, which step are you going to take first? The one with all or the one with masked? All. I'm hearing all. I'm hearing very consistent all. Chat, what do you think? All?
Yeah,
full page. Bethany's in there.
Page.
All. I would agree. Why? You're limiting them. You can roll it back. You can always go back and mask, right? So start with it unmasked. Make them prove to you that they can't do it, because then you can always roll back.
And I'll just add to that. Again, I think many of the students that I work with can use a full system, but it's the adults around them that are uncomfortable, that don't feel like it's too much, all of those things, which is valid, because we can have a student, and maybe I should share, I'm going to share a story about a student that I worked with. I actually just shared this on my Instagram. Lamp Words for Life, which we've already kind of seen that system, and people were like, it feels messy, it feels overwhelming. So I started off with this little girl. She started on Lamp Words for Life. We had the full system. And after the first day of introduction, everyone was all upset because she just kept hitting all the buttons. Felt random. She was just like playing with it. She wasn't using it functionally. I was working with her ABA team, and they're like, this is a no-go. Like, we're not using this. She's stimming on it. Fast forward, I'm like, everybody calm down. Attribute meaning, meaning when she says something on the AAC, we just follow that lead and we, build off of what she's saying. Fast forward like 3 months, and we had realized that this little girl had learned where every single word was on her system. It was like a party trick. It was like, unicorn, and she could like find the most obscure of words she could find. But, so she basically what I'm saying is that all of that exploration was her learning the words and her finding those words. And so there's kind of 2 lessons here. One, we can't assume that we know a student's intention. We can't say, oh, they're not using it functionally. Well, they're using it for some purpose, right? So that's the first kind of lesson is stimming and all these things that we kind of put into this box as non-functional can actually be our students exploring their systems. The second kind of lesson here is just because she knew where every single word was on her system, she still wasn't really using language functionally. She wasn't communicating with us. And the reason why was because we need to show students how to use language in meaningful situations in order for them to use the language themselves. She knew where every single word was, but she couldn't actually use it until she had all the adults around her using it. And then it ties in. Why are you laughing? What's going on?
I'm laughing because it's really the activity we did earlier. What is little? What is big?
Yeah.
What is? It's just labeling them all. It's the same idea.
Yeah. So essentially, we need to make sure that we're creating meaningful opportunities for students to learn the power of those words. Again, like she could find any word, but she wasn't using those words. So it goes into the importance of aided language input. And the barrier for that student for not using language functionally was the circle of support around her and not knowing where the words were, and everyone was overwhelmed, and everyone was like, we can't do it, she can't do it, no one can do it. I'm like, she can do it. You need to learn how to do it. So we did end up using Vocabulary Builder and Lamp Words for Life, which is a way to strategically mask some of the vocabulary in specific situations. So it can be a strategy to use. The caveat is, if we are going to use a masking strategy like this, theoretically we're doing this because everyone feels overwhelmed, right? Everyone feels overwhelmed with this system. So if we mask some of the vocabulary and we use a system like this, theoretically, over time, every week, we should be able to reveal more and more vocabulary. Maybe it's not visually overwhelming here, it isn't visually overwhelming here, but theoretically, we should be able to add new vocabulary every week. So you don't want to get stuck here. By no means do we start here and end here, or wait till individuals show mastery of specific vocabulary before we move on. Does that make sense? Awesome. All right. Now, fast forward. We already did the gut punch.
I do want to mention one thing because there was we wanted to clarify. So when we say core boards, do we know what we mean by that? I felt like maybe we got some weird looks. Like, what do you mean by a core board? Like, isn't on an iPad the board that you're using, is that a board? What we really mean is a construction paper printed out, maybe laminated thing that you hand out to somebody, right? That's the core board. Yes, the AAC apps might be called boards as well, but it's more thinking of that as an app. Make sense?
Okay.
Okay.
This is going to be fun.
All right, it's time to play some Pictionary. We need a volunteer. Okay, it's Teresa, right? Teresa, have you done this one with us before? Okay, excellent. Come on, Teresa. So come on down. Teresa, we're going to ask Teresa to leave the room. Rachel and I packed a, actually, did you get it, Molly, the soundproof room? We sent it from Amazon.
Yeah, done.
It's right out here, right? There's a soundproof room out here. We're going to send Teresa to the soundproof room. Molly, you're going to go with her?
I'm going to make sure.
Make sure that she's not listening. So Teresa left. Now let's talk about Teresa. No. what you're going to need for this activity is a piece of paper or a device or something to draw on, okay? Because what we're going to talk about now is the picture symbols and what they mean. So, okay, so, and you chat, I don't know, Maddie, we should have talked about this. Is there a way that we can pull them up so we can see the grid?
See all their faces and their pictures?
Because chat, we're going to ask you to do this too. Paper, iPad, whatever you want to use to draw something, okay? What's that?
Yeah. That'll show
Okay,
everyone
great. Yeah.
on the grid view.
Okay. Yeah, they don't need to see the slides for this anyway. Cindy and Anna will come back to your questions after this portion. Okay, just a couple questions about the core boards. Okay, does everyone have their instrument for drawing? Okay, so I'm going to turn off my mic. Okay, we all have it? Good. All right, no one tell Teresa. She's going to guess. Okay, sound good?
All right.
Guys, good? Yeah, okay, great.
These are great. I see a lot of hammers. A lot of hammers.
All right, Molly and Teresa, you ready? Did you hear? You didn't hear. Okay, you didn't hear what we said? Chit-chatting? Okay, good.
She already picked out her swag.
Oh, you won. Okay, you got your prize already. Okay. All right. All right, Teresa, here's what we did. We asked everybody in the room and in chat to draw a picture of a word, okay? Simple task. You get to guess what that word is, all right? And why don't you come over here and look at Crystal's drawing. This is a nervous part for me because if she gets it right on the first thing, it blows the whole.
It totally does.
Door.
Door! Did she get it right? No. No. Okay, how about, well, it's at Cindy's. No, it's the same word.
Steps?
Steps. Door, steps. Did we get it?
Doorway.
Doorway? Did we? No, not get it. How about, let's take a look over here. What do we got, Stephanie?
Carrying boxes.
Aha, okay. Now, I'm going to give you another strategy, and that is, since it's all the same word, start thinking about putting the pictures together, right? Trying to image it. Yeah.
Doorway. Delivery man.
Maybe delivery, but what's that person?
Totally different.
I want to see our Zoom.
Maybe a person with a shovel?
Well, right. I'm thinking a person with the shovel, but that has nothing to do with door or boxes or grave.
Grave. Did she get it right, grave? No.
Was it
Teresa,
grave?
look at this. Chat has all done this image.
your
You
pictures
can see
up,
a whole
chat.
bunch of everybody. Jenny, quick, finish drawing.
Hammers. Hammer table.
Okay, hammer, table. Think about those other images.
What is that?
How about this one? Look at this. Trisha has a good one.
Can I give a clue?
I think you're making your point.
We are.
That's the point of this.
Yep. The picture doesn't mean anything.
The picture doesn't mean anything unless you teach somebody what the word means, right? It's just a bunch of squiggly lines because we're all a bunch of dirty, rotten cheaters. Because we can read, we can look at the AAC apps, and we know what those pictures mean, right? But
So
when you don't
what
know.
was the answer?
What was the answer, everybody?
Work.
Work, right? Notice the words that Teresa used. Steps, boxes, grave. Those are all nouns, right? It's so easy to draw a picture of a noun, right? But that's why in Pictionary you don't get nouns, you get verbs, you get adjectives. They're so much harder to draw. Core vocabulary is hard to draw. Like, what would you draw for the word it if I had said it? What did you say? A clown. A clown. That's significant. That's significant.
It is.
Yeah, that was great, Teresa. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice job, Teresa. All right.
Thanks, chat. You did a great job with the pictures. So, yeah. all
We're
right.
a bunch of cheaters.
Yeah.
us communication partners are a bunch of cheaters because we have literacy skills, right?
Yes.
I like to think about again, going back to this idea of like they're not using it functionally or they're just tapping away. What would you do if you had to communicate with this system? How would you learn it? You'd do the same thing. You'd tap away, you'd tap and listen, tap and listen, tap and listen, right?
You're clearly stimming on it.
Clearly you guys are stimming on it. Also, again, we're trying to loop in the visual impairment. This is oftentimes something we see when we're working with kids with cortical visual impairment or some type of low vision, is they're tapping and listening to find an anchor point. I have a student that I'm working with right now, and his anchor on his AAC in his food folder is acai. So everyone's like, he's perseverating on acai. All he ever asks for is acai. And I'm like, no. If you watch him and you listen to what he does, he'll tap around, he'll find acai, and then he'll be able to find his selection. And you know it because he stops once he's found it. So, all of these, again, behaviors that we chalk up to stimming and non-functional, they're just playing with it, can actually be super intentional if you actually observe what's going on. And again, remember, we have the labels on these AAC systems. So when we're trying to model the word on, we know exactly where it is because we can read, right? We're scanning and reading these systems to learn where they are. Our students who don't have literacy skills yet, this is what they look at, basically. They're looking at the symbols. They have to be modeled, and they have to have lots of repetition with those symbols in order to learn the vocabulary.
Now, some of the symbols, like in Pro Lo Quo here, are very similar. Like there's two symbols there where it's a person pointing at a box. But one box pointing up to the box, the other one they're pointing down to the box. You see that? Those over there, right?
It's so different.
You got to teach what that means, right? But other systems use images that draw upon your background knowledge. They're not trying to be an exact representation of what the word might mean, which is why when we said it and you said balloon or a clown, it's significant, right? Why is that significant? Because you can teach it, right? Pennywise is a clown, so I can relate, especially maybe adults, maybe we don't do kids, but it's a little scary. But the idea is, oh, you have some experience with this word, it, and so we can relate it to an image, right? Like a red balloon or a clown. Cool. In the LAMP Words for Life system, in the Unity system, the conjunction in is a bridge, right? It's the link to conjunctions is a bridge. Why? Yes. And where's the train?
Trying to pull it up.
There's
trying to pull up LAMP. Where is it?
Sorry, it's for prepositions, not conjunctions. Yes. I said that wrong. It's prepositions, the bridge, right? The conjunctions are a train. Why?
Here we go.
Why would conjunctions be a train? It's no joke, Teresa. That's exactly why they did it. It's because they could draw on kids' background knowledge of Schoolhouse Rock for conjunction junction. That's exactly why they chose a train for the image of conjunctions. In this case, it's and, right? You're joining two trains together. You're coupling the trains. And why? They lots of different ways. It could have been a plus sign for and a lot of systems might use a plus sign. But that's another symbol that you have to teach. What's a plus sign? It's just two lines that's randomly drawn. But we could say conjunction junction's a song we can sing, and it has trains in it, and two trains join together, and we're joining them together. So there was some background knowledge we can use.
What about the sheep, Chris?
Oh yeah, the sheep, okay. Okay, let's start with the sheep. It, right? Someone, again, back to the idea that people sat around a table at some point and had to make a decision. What picture are we going to use for it? Well, again, you could use some amorphous blob, right? But then you still got to teach it. You say, okay, what's some background knowledge kids might know? Any guesses where the sheep came from?
And it was white as snow.
Yes, you want to say that twice as loud?
And it was white as snow.
Destiny says its fleece was white as snow. It's exactly what. Kids in the 80s, we taught them nursery rhymes, and the kids knew nursery rhymes. So it's related to, what's this it that they can relate to? Its fleece was white as snow. Mary had a little lamb. It's a lamb, not a sheep, right?
Woo.
Cool. But today's day and age, if we were sitting around the table making this, I really could make the case that maybe we use a clown, right? Because people are going to be much more familiar, our middle school students are going to be much more familiar with Pennywise, the clown. If you don't know what we're talking about, Pennywise is the clown from the movie It, right? Or a red balloon, which is another symbol in that movie for It, right? But it's, what's that? The sus button?
Sus button, it's coming.
Yeah. So and all of the pictures in these Lamp Words for Life, these PRC systems, have a story around them. So you can go back. We won't spend the time to talk about all of them, and I don't know all of the history of all of them, so where the wizard came from. But there is a story. There is a relation to it.
All right.
OK. Another quick example, again, if you're trying to convince people, is to draw a Chinese symbol on them. You're like, what's this? People are like, I don't know what this Chinese symbol is. It's a Chinese symbol for water. I do that all the time. I'll draw a picture of like a just Chinese symbol. Like, that's water. I'm like, I don't know the Chinese symbol for water. But I just told you what these squiggly lines mean, and now you learned that that's what it meant, right? It's just squiggly lines. Can you go back one to the Proloquo, because there's one last one to show you. And that is this one, the O and the F. Do you see it? That symbol, OF, right? How do you know what that symbol is? Do you see it? It's just an O and an F. Between C and up, there's an O and an F. What word is that? How do you know that? You learned it, but you didn't learn it by yourself. Someone taught you that that squiggly line and that squiggly line make the word of, right? And so what does that mean for the other symbols? We have to teach them. What did you say? Yeah. They have to be taught. They have to be taught. Teach what the symbols mean. And that can work, again, for kids all the way through up adults. It's not, we can teach what these symbols mean.
All right.
Good stuff? Yeah.
Have to run the mic anymore. I'm just wondering, in relation to what you were talking about earlier, like with the Applebee's thing, and you're talking about all the core vocabulary you could use to talk about Applebee's and have that conversation. So the temptation is to go add a whole bunch of communication buttons of core words around your Applebee's, but does every one have to be taught before you add it, or do you like just model it, and people learn that way?
You said it, Shauna.
You answered your question.
It's both. Yeah. You want to, so you would want to have a system with the core vocabulary, with Applebee's being a fringe vocabulary word that might also be in the system or that you add to the system. You want to teach what those core vocabulary words mean explicitly. So imagine a week of like, here's what go is and going is. We're going to read stories about going, and every time we hit go, we're going to go out the door. We're going to go out to eat. And what does that mean? You know, we're going to combine it with other words, go and eat. So you have this explicit, and we plan that as a teacher or as whatever your job title is, whoever's supporting those people, we plan what those experiences are. You know what would be really fun is if we, you know, had a mock Applebee's and you dressed up as a waiter, you know, and we came over and we practiced. Okay, here's some things you can say, you know. I want more. I'm thirsty, or whatever, you know, to order, whatever. You're creating experiences, and you're modeling on the communication device. So you're doing both. It's explicit and modeling.
Which kind of leads into what we're talking about with modeling. We're going to talk about explicit teaching, we're going to talk about modeling.
Yes.
Okay.
Before we move on, Anna, we're going to address your question later. Maddie, can you scroll just one? There was another question about the core boards we wanted to address, I think. It was Cindy's question. Don't some of the words have subcategories? Like if you choose play, would there be subcategories for games, sports, and etc.?
Are they talking about for lamp? I wonder.
I don't know. Cindy, can you clarify your question? Put it in the chat.
Okay.
Okay.
Moving on.
So, okay, one last thing about picture representation, and that is, can you imagine in your mind what the picture might be for the word on? Right? Can you imagine in your mind what that be? Many of you might be picturing the board maker symbol, a square with a circle on top of it, right? But think about how we actually use the word on. how often is it on represented as a thing resting above or on top of another thing, right? The way we use on is so varied, right? It's like I'm on medication, or I'm on time, right? Or if you're in New York, you're standing online, right? Go on, get out of here, and like there's so many examples. We could go on and on and on with examples, right? So again, the point behind the picture is you have to teach it explicitly, and you do that also by modeling it. Like, okay, how do I explicitly teach the word of? We're going to show how it's used in sentences by modeling it.
And again, circling back to motor planning, because that's component number 4, eventually we just learn the motor plan. I'm not searching for Facebook. I'm just there. All right.
So component 4, motor memory.
Yes. Okay. Oh, this is another
It's a quick activity.
prize winner?
Yeah, we got it. Another prize. Again, you can email me for a code to a course. You can check out Rachel, and then we have some prizes up here, sort of your choice of what you want to win. But, oh, you have to go back a slide.
I do?
Yeah. So, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I guess you don't. Okay. Yes. There's a famous quote by somebody named Jane Corsten. Jane Corsten posted this quote to the Quiet listserv, Quality Indicators for Assistive Technology, all about AAC. Can someone find it?
Whoever finds it first gets a prize. Go.
Famous quote, do a search on your phone, on your
Raise your hand or
app,
put it in the chat.
iPad.
Copy and paste it into the chat for our Zoomers.
Or just famous quote, Jane Corsten, Korsten.
Tawny has it.
Tawny thinks she's got it.
Maybe. Is it the average 18-month-olds?
That's the one.
Yes.
Been exposed to 4,380 hours of oral language at a rate of 8 hours a day from birth. A child who has a communication system and receives speech-language therapy 2 times a week for 20 to 30 minutes will reach the same amount of language exposure in their AAC language in 84 years.
Whoa.
Oh, that just hit some people hard.
It's pretty crazy, right? But how many of the individuals that we're working with are only seeing their AAC model during their therapy sessions, right? And that's just kind of reiterates how powerful modeling is. I want to share, though, I don't remember where exactly this was, but I'd say within the last month, someone had shared this, and there was kind of a dialogue discussion underneath. Actually, it was Mummy versus AAC. She's on, I think she posted about this.
She's going to be on the podcast soon.
She is. I love how I'm talking about people through their Instagram handles. But she was talking about, as a mom, she felt really disempowered by this. And so it was really interesting to hear her perspective, because she said, I feel like I'm already not doing enough. So to know that like me not doing enough is going to take 84 years to get there was really, really disheartening. So I feel like the lesson there, I think, is with professionals, this really makes an impact. I also think it can make an impact with parents. But we have to make sure that when we're training communication partners and we're talking to them, we're really gauging where they're at. And I'd say, because I work with a lot of parents in my practice, I'm always really trying to get to the bottom of like, how much bandwidth do you have right now? How do you feel like everything's going? And some families are like, give me more, I'm ready. And other families are like, it's not a good time. I'm in fight or flight, survival mode over here. So I just wanted to share that caveat, because I hadn't thought about that perspective. I always thought this was a super powerful visual that shows the importance of aided language input, but by no means do we want, the opposite to happen. Like we show this and it's like, well, feels like this is impossible and I can't even try, So, all right, let's talk about modeling really quickly.
So we said model, model, model. What does modeling mean? It means the person, people, the support network around the AAC user needs to use the device more, the tool, more than the AAC user themselves. How else do they learn it? We asked you how you learned ING, right? It's because people are modeling it. So we have to model. one strategy for modeling is to be a narrator of your own actions. So when I first sit down, as Sean is the communication partner, I might sit down next to that communication partner. I might have the communication or next to the AAC user. Shauna is the AAC user. I'm the communication partner. I might sit right next to Shauna. Shauna, I might say, oh, you have it. You take, you're holding it? I sit. I do. And I might bring out my phone. My phone's up there.
I'm not throwing your phone.
Come on. I would catch it.
Definitely not.
Right? So I know behind you can't see, but Shauna has a camera. Hold it up, right? So I might sit down and I'd be like, oh, I do it. And I take my phone out and I take a picture, right? Yeah. Right? I do it. It's good.
That's right.
I like it. Right. I'm done, and then move away. Shauna, no expectation to do anything. Just, I'm next to you, and I'm going to model what I'm doing. I'm talking about what I'm doing, right? It's helpful if there's something there that we can reference, but if not, if it was crayons, then I'd just pick up crayons, and I would say, I'm coloring, I'm doing it, no expectation the person does anything at first. Right? This is a strategy called self-talk. You're just narrating about what you're doing. And the flip of that, which I hinted at a little bit with Shauna, is looking at what Shauna's doing and talking about that. Oh, you're sitting. You're taking a picture. It clicks. Aim it. Like I'm just, again, narrating what you're doing. You're aiming it. Narrating what the person is doing.
One of the most frequent strategies that I'm teaching communication partners is this idea of expansion. So typically what happens when I observe, and we're going to talk about video modeling and coaching in a little bit, but I'm observing an interaction. This actually just happened the other day. I was seeing a family, and they said go when it was time to go. And everyone's response was, yay, which is great. I'm really excited that the student said go, but my SLP brain is always thinking, how can we be one step above an individual's language level? So this child said go, I'm thinking, oh, you want to go home? So the idea of leveling up, and it starts with just observing spontaneous language. So unfortunately, we're not going to have a chance to go through kind of the way that I think about vocabulary selection, but one of the most important things we can do is track spontaneous language. What does an individual say completely on their own without adult support? And sometimes, oftentimes I'll meet a family, and that's the first thing, that's their first homework assignment. Take the spontaneous language tracking sheet, tell me what they said and in what context, and then we'll look at it back together. Sometimes what happens is parents come back to me and they're like, they don't really say much of anything on their own. Okay, now I've automatically demonstrated the importance of modeling, the importance of, like, let's talk about why they're not saying anything. We talk about the prompting hierarchy. We talk about all these strategies, right? But the other thing it helps me do is it helps me see, one, what is the individual motivated by? Because if there's spontaneous communication, it's typically because there's intrinsic motivation to communicate. So I look at the spontaneous language tracking. I'm thinking about, okay, the student said crackers. And then I'm working with communication partners on what's the next step above that. Where do we want to guide their language development? And that practice of, okay, crackers, what's a good next word? Let's go. Crackers, what's the next step? Raise your hand if you have an idea or shout it out. Eat. Eat crackers. Awesome. Anything else? More crackers. Give crackers. Exactly. You guys are doing the strategy. No crackers. Yeah, negation. Amazing. So you guys kind of get the idea, but if the response to go is just, yay, we've missed an opportunity where we know a student is intrinsically motivated to communicate. And again, if every time they say go, we say home, oh, you want to go home right now? That's what they're absorbing. That's what they're learning. That's what they're seeing us model. And then they're going to start spontaneously saying, go home. Make sense? Awesome. All right.
Did we say the expansion could also be a morpheme?
Yes, it can.
Right? So this could be the ing. This could be the ed. This is a way, again, to illustrate that the word has different forms, and those different forms have different meaning. Yeah. And then go slow. Oh, we need to refresh.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Another strategy is This is often something people feel bad about or intimidated by, is like, oh my gosh, there's this robust system and I have to know where all the words are. How am I ever going to get fast or proficient at this? Well, it's actually okay if you're not. The slower you go to find the words, it's okay, because the person that you're modeling for has more time to absorb that, right? I have seen some people, me included, I'm culprit, get really good at a particular system, and I'm just like, look how fast I am at modeling. Oh, look, I'm the rock star, right? I'm not really teaching anybody. It's about me at that point, not the person that I'm working with, right? Go slower. You can go slow.
And that's something really important to share with communication partners, because it's really overwhelming and you're like, I can't find the words. I'm sure we've all worked with people who feel very overwhelmed by navigating a system. Another strategy is like a think aloud. So I'm thinking about the word is giraffe. I think giraffe is in the things folder. And now I think giraffe is an animal. So we're gonna, thank you. Let's see if it's in the animal folder. Like, these are all learning opportunities for individuals to figure out how we got there. Instead of just, navigating for them, talking about that. Oh, it's not in that folder. Let's go out of this folder. Just having that think aloud can be another really great strategy. And something that makes communication partners feel like, phew, like I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to know where all these words are. And even other SLPs and other professionals, it just was like, okay, I don't need to know where every single thing is. I can take my time and I can find it. I can talk about the process of me finding the word. The other thing I think it does is it shows our students like we're learning next to you. We're learning alongside of you. I don't know where all of your words are. I know you don't know where all your words are. That's okay. I think that's a really important element too, is that we're on equal playing field here. Because I always think about that when I'm thinking about the students that I work with. And I'm sure in a lot of ways it always feels like, well, the teacher always knows the answer. And I feel like that's not always the case. And I think it helps level the playing field when you're like, I'm still learning too. I'm not sure. I made a mistake. All of those things can be really helpful. Okay. Wait for it. Pausing is really an important strategy. We're not going to go over the least to most prompting hierarchy today. A lot of people said they already know that. Why are you looking at me like that? Are we going over it?
Just one slide on it.
Oh, okay. Just one slide. But the most important thing is that we give this space and time for our students to start communicating spontaneously. And oftentimes, again, when I'm doing observations, I'm just seeing communication partners jump in very quickly to model a word, to ask a question. And if we never give students that space, then they'll always rely on the prompts, right? They'll always rely on someone to model for them. They'll always rely on someone to say, go get your talker, or what do you want? And so the pausing is such a crucial strategy to use so that kids can start thinking, okay, that expected thing is not happening. Like, what do I do? There's a device in front of me. What word could I say right now? Maybe I'll say go. I feel like I heard that, before in this situation. Like, that process for students is what allows them to start generating that language on their own and then, using their communication system to communicate that message.
So one strategy really is just to see? It works.
How awkward did everyone just feel?
It's go through that awkward pause because you had to process, what is it? What are they? Oh, wait. And students are doing the same thing.
And the other thing is, too, I think we put devices in front of students, and especially when we're, what?
Not just students, adults, too.
Adults, too. We expect something, right? We're like, okay, show them what you can say, right? And we put a lot of pressure on our individuals with complex communication needs. And like Chris had mentioned, we can model without expectation. They don't have to say anything. If they choose to, great. But we don't have to have that demand for communication, which we're going to talk about in a few slides.
Back to the previous point, Bethany says, one of my favorite things to do is get my students to help me find a specific word. I use my smartboard to navigate, and it's a scavenger hunt at times,
Love it.
right? How
Make
fun
it
is
fun.
that?
Make it fun. All right.
Okay, skip it.
We already talked about attributing meaning.
Skip it.
Look at me with my modeling. We just talked about modeling without expectation.
Yeah, but let's hit it just really hard.
Okay.
Because notice, again, when I sat down next to Shauna, I want to illustrate this, Crystal. I want to illustrate this because there was no expectation that Shauna do a darn thing. That's really important. When we have the little baby and we're talking about pooping, right? We don't have an immediate expectation that that baby's going to do something, but we're modeling all the time, right? We're constantly putting drops in the bucket, and eventually the bucket fills up and it spills over. But immediately asking a student to and putting pressure on them to do it, now it's a performance game, right? So we can have a long-term expectation that someday they're going to say things, but especially at first, if I'm just introducing some new vocabulary and teaching them, do I have to immediately expect that they go find it and hit it? No, they just need to see us doing it for a while.
Speaking of modeling, do you only model on the device? You don't do any hand-over-hand prompting, I guess?
I'll answer that very explicitly. I never touch kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a simple rule. They can touch me, but I don't hug kids. Kids hug me, and then I'll hug them back. Do you know what I mean? I don't touch their hand, and I'll let them touch me. So like if some kids will come over and they'll grab my hand and my hand becomes the pointer, yes, but I don't touch kids. Is that fair?
Even if you can get kids to comply with the activity that you're doing and the communication that you're expecting, it doesn't mean that it's ever going to generalize. So my focus is on independent, autonomous communication. And very rarely do I see a student who is, being told what to say, actually generalize that language. Again, they can comply, but are they actually going to say something? And that's where we have to get into intrinsic motivation. We're going to talk about motivating activities and how we can inspire communication with kids. Go ahead, Molly.
And I'll just throw in with the OT perspective too, that we probably have a slightly different interpretation of hands-on kids. Mm-hmm. So if there is an issue with access and with motor planning, that's a great time to bring in your OT to look at positioning and see if there is something with the way things are set up where we might be able to have more success.
Awesome. This also, just to reiterate, again, don't know anybody. I don't know any adult, and all the different people we've interviewed, all the different conferences we've gone to and met people, all the different clients we work with that said, you know what really worked for me is when they grabbed my hand and did it for me. But what people do tell us is when people have modeled for us and taught us what the words mean and showed us what the words mean, that's how I learned what the words are. Okay, then that's what we'll do.
You know what I'm realizing, Chris, is that it wasn't synced to the internet. So our skip slides, I'm trying to sync it. We had skipped some slides, you guys, because we knew we weren't going to have time for everything.
So we'll do it at break.
Okay.
We know what we were skipping.
All right. Where were we at here?
Okay, so all this idea with modeling is, it sounds sort of, I don't know, some people might think it sounds hard. Other people might think it was easy. Okay, I just sit there and I use the device. That's easy. I can learn where the words are and start doing that, right? The truth is, it's complicated, and there's strategies out there that you can get your whole organization around to help everyone use the same words, the same jargon, the same vocabulary around modeling. The two most prevalent ones, one is called S'mores by Jill Center and Matt Baud, and the other one that we have up here on the slide deck is called Master Pal by Tabby Jones-Williver. I just saw someone on Instagram do one called WISE. Well, you can make up your own, right? You can put the strategies together in some cute little acronym and then use that. Make posters around your facility about we're all doing this Master Pal. I'm going to be a Master Pal, right? You can teach it that way so everyone can then start talking. Oh, you know what I noticed? I noticed that, Rachel, when you were working with that kid, you didn't wait as long as, or hey, I saw you working. Did you notice anything I did that could be done differently? Was I jumping in too fast, So.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm toggling on and off because I'm trying to figure out where we are in time and space. Okay.
But you can adopt one of these strategies. And again, we've had Jill Center and Matt Baud on the podcast. We've had Tabby Jones-Williver on the podcast. You can go and listen to these episodes to get it right from the horse's mouth about what each one of these different portions of the acronym might mean.
Okay, this is from a podcast episode with Kathy Howery up in Canada, and I love this quote. I think it's important to not give families, especially the expectation that all you have to do is tap away on their system, and that will be sufficient. I think it's necessary, but I don't know if it's sufficient. And so it's this idea of modeling, giving immersive language exposure on AAC to our students, alongside of sometimes our students need explicit instruction. They need situations with lots of repetition to practice core vocabulary and all of the words that we want to teach them. And oftentimes I'm working with other SLPs, and they're like, I'm modeling, but it doesn't seem like it's working. And and my response is, you're doing a beautiful job of modeling, but we also have to think about this idea of taking, what students are intrinsically motivated by, and then creating opportunities around them so that they're able to have enough repetitive practice with those words for it to actually stick. And so I just wanted to mention that. The other thing is, we presented this at ATIA. Chris sent this slide to Kathy, and her response was awesome.
Yeah, Kathy texted me back as I said, hey, look what we're talking about, Kathy. And she was like, the other thing I think you should always say is that it's about connection with the person, not really modeling. What she's seen sometimes is the communication partner sitting with the AAC person, the person learning to use AAC, and the communication partner is so into trying to find the words that they lose the moment with the person, and the connection is broken. Be in the moment with the person. Even if you don't get to put as many drops in the bucket, even if you don't get to model all the different words or portions of words, the core themes, some is better than none. One is better than some, but don't lose the connection. Be with the person. That's what's really meaningful.
And when I'm working with communication partners that feel very overwhelmed by all of this, and they're very overwhelmed by the AAC, they're like, I don't even know where the AAC is half the time. One really great strategy is to just focus on modeling the language verbally. Because oftentimes we're modeling a lot of nouns with kids, right? We're like, what do you want? Do you want to play on the swing or go to the slide? And just getting them into the habit of modeling language and emphasizing, oh, you want to go? Let's go to the swing, not even having the device. Sometimes I'll split that up for communication partners as a way to just say, get used to modeling the word go. Then once they're thinking through that language, they're thinking go when they go to the door, when they go to the car, and all these situations, then it's layer in the device, right? Now let's show where it is on the device. So sometimes that's a really helpful step for communication partners who just are like, I feel like I'm not doing this, I'm not doing it right. So hopefully that can be helpful for you guys, breaking that apart. Obviously, best case scenario is we're modeling it verbally and we're modeling it on the AAC. But again, how can we break down some of these things into small, bite-sized, manageable chunks for communication partners who are feeling overwhelmed? Because the reality is someone who's overwhelmed is going to just give up. They're going to be like, whatever, not doing it, right? But if the device not being there is the roadblock, then how can I just model that language verbally? I give an example of a family. I was coaching a mom, and she had this beautiful interaction we were watching, and she was like, the device wasn't around. They were on a swing. And I was like, that's totally fine. Like, you have an opportunity to connect with your daughter and model go. Ready, set, go. And we have those opportunities. Just splitting them up sometimes can be really helpful. Okay, I don't know.
I think I said one is better than some. Okay, yeah. Whoops. All right. Real quick, because on the Google form, many of you said you already understand the least to most hierarchy for prompting. Maybe not in context with AAC, but you get the idea that there's a hierarchy for how you provide prompts. And this is how we can tease and tempt people to respond. We already talked about the very first strategy, which was to pause, wait, exactly. And you're going to get a response sometimes. But if that's not the case, then maybe, Rachel, you might use body language, right. And then you might add some sort of open-ended question like?
Or comment.
Or a comment.
It depends what word I'm eliciting. We can do, I always use the example of open, because I feel like it's really visual. I always have a water bottle near me, so I'm like, let's talk about the word open. So if I'm trying to elicit this, the key with the prompting hierarchy, you have to give enough aided language input and teaching before you utilize this. So if I'm just introducing the word open to a student or an individual, I'm not expecting that a tempt and pause is going to do anything useful, right? I might tempt and pause to see what they say, and they might say water, right? But I'm trying to elicit open. So the first step is giving sufficient aided language input, which sometimes there's lots of prompting hierarchies out there. Sometimes you'll see that at like the top little umbrella. I'm thinking about Kate Ahern's. So anyway, then once I feel like I've taught the word, the prompting hierarchy is a way to scaffold the support so that students become more independent. You see the top of this prompting hierarchy in the green is more independent, and the bottom is in the red and less dependent. So again, kind of going back to your question about hand over hand, it's real far away from independent communication, right? So anyway, going through this prompting hierarchy is a way to kind of help communication partners not just jump in and give too much support. So let me ask you guys a question. Where do most people land? Most communication partners, where are they landing on this prompting hierarchy?
Yeah, what do you see in your neck of the woods? Chat, what do you see?
Where do people land here?
A lot of people would point to the device. A lot of hand over hand.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone kind of is all over the map, right? It's mostly not tempt and pause and use body language. It's mostly ask for a response. What do you want? Tell me on your talker, right? We're jumping in and giving that verbal prompting. You know, and that's where working with communication partners on the more nuanced prompting, right? Like using body language, making a comment, oh man, I'm so thirsty, and waiting, right? And another helpful strategy when we're using a prompting hierarchy is set up some type of expected routine. So it's like, if the word is open, every time I go to the refrigerator door, I'm saying, let's open it, right? Let's open it. I'm modeling that language. I'm setting up an expected routine. I'm teaching that language. And then one day, I go to the refrigerator, I put my hand on the door, and I just wait, right? Because I've set up an expected routine with expected language, and now I'm giving space for an individual to initiate with me. And if they don't initiate, then I go through the prompting hierarchy. Then maybe I'm like, and they still don't initiate, then maybe I'm asking an open-ended question like, oh, I'm so thirsty. Or what should we do, right? But I'm not jumping to, let's open it, right? And again, I think it's confusing because people see model on the device here in the red, and they're like, I thought modeling was really good. Like, why is it all the way down there? It is really good. We need that immersive language input for the individuals that we're working with. But when we're thinking about from most independent to least independent, modeling and then having a student imitate that model isn't very independent, right? It's like we're basically, here's the word you can say in this situation, which is how individuals learn how to use words. So modeling isn't bad, but when we're thinking about the prompting hierarchy, we want to try and fade back our models and give space for individuals to start communicating more independently and more autonomously. Do you have a question? Yes. Yes. Yes.
Right. What Teresa's saying, chat, is, yeah, and you got it, is there's two types of modeling. There's modeling like the self-talk and parallel talk, where there is no expectation that they respond here. Same idea, though. There's not necessarily, but then you can pause and wait. And if they don't do anything, then you might add a gesture. And if they don't respond when you add a gesture, then you can add an open-ended question. And if they don't respond after adding an open-ended question, then you might ask for a response. And if they don't do that, then if they still don't have a response, then you might point to a device or a symbol. And that is really suggesting something that might be in your brain. Other people might say this. Right? And then modeling it on the device is the next step up from that.
By the time you get down to the bottom of this prompting hierarchy in the red, point to device, model on the device, one of two things have happened. Either the individual's not motivated to say what you thought they wanted to say, or they haven't been given enough aided language input. They haven't been given enough teaching around open to then think, oh, open it, right? So that just means we give more aided language input. We kind of start again, and then maybe we check in. Or we find a different activity that's more motivating to use that word open.
I think it's really important for what's on the screen to illustrate that Rachel works mostly with families, right?
Yes.
And I work mostly with teachers and educators with a little bit of flop, right? So that physical touch on the hierarchy that we use, which is also linked, we just are not bringing it up on the slide deck, you have it in your slides, does not have physical touch. Because as a parent, maybe it's okay to provide a little bit of guidance, but as an educator, I'm not going to touch the kids. If that's confusing at all. Well, why does it say physical touch? Chris just said he doesn't touch the kids. Well, because parents, maybe it's a little different.
Yeah, I mean,
fair?
I never suggest that with parents either. No. It's more on there to be like, don't do that. See how red it is?
Yeah. See how it's like, yeah.
All right, and this is just a parent coaching video of me kind of coaching a mom about wait time, and we're kind of cycling in and out of this prompting hierarchy. So feel free to watch that.
Final thing to say about least to most prompting. It's a skill. Which means it's a skill just like throwing a basketball or throwing a football or riding a bike or anything. It's a skill. So it's going to take practice, just like descriptive teaching, describing words. It's going to take practice. It's not like you can just print this out and put it everywhere and someone's going to just, by osmosis, start doing it. They're still going to be random all over the place, so it's a skill. And in order to learn a skill like throwing a football or throwing a basketball or riding a bike, it's really good to have someone to coach you through that. So maybe that could be your role, is help someone coach through. Yes?
I would say one of the most common things I hear is, I don't know what their motivator is, or I can't figure that out. What would you suggest parents, teachers, paras look for when they're looking for that motivator? Because there are those kids that you think you found the motivator, and then they just walk away.
Mm-hmm. I would say that all individuals are motivated by something, and sometimes that's walking away. So I would teach them how to say, I don't want to do this, I don't like this, I'm bored, stop, give them some type of protesting language. And sometimes that's a way to kind of get buy-in, like with trust, because I feel like so often our individuals are used to having this expectation that like we put your AAC in front of you and then you communicate with me, right? And if we give them the words that they actually want to communicate that have power for them and meaning, then we're going to get buy-in. We're going to be like, wow, like that was great. I said stop and someone stopped. Or I said, I don't want to do it and I didn't have to. Now I realize in schools and things like that, sometimes we can say I don't want to do that, or I want to be yelled at, or I want to go home. We would just say, we can't go home yet. It's not time to go home. But giving that language is really important. And I know it feels really hard when you're working with students and you're like, I feel like they're not motivated by much. And don't get me wrong, I have students where I'm like, they're not motivated by much. But I don't know if we're going to get to the Inspire, Don't Require. It's all types of skipped and messed up. But Inspire, Don't Require is a phrase that I love to use, and I think about it like this. You know, it would be really easy if we could just tell everyone what to say and they just would communicate with us, right? But that's not the reality of complex communicators. That's not our reality as educators. And so, you know, it's my job to find something so exciting and so motivating. And sometimes that means I'm so motivated to leave this room right now, right? But it's my job as an educator to find that thing that inspires communication from you. It's my job. It's not, you're not motivated by anything. It's, I haven't figured out a way to find what you're motivated by and to teach you in a way that resonates so you're able to learn how to communicate.
I like to say, have you tried robots? Have you tried Minecraft? Have you tried Bloxels? Have you tried race cars? Have you tried, just keep going, because there's an infinite amount of things that'll be motivating. Something that's almost always motivating, though, is controlling somebody else.
Yes, so. I was going to say, I had a kid that started communicating. They never thought he would ever communicate, and it was because he wanted his sister to get out of his face.
Yeah.
Totally.
So the button said, get out of my face, and he pushed that button so many times until we were able to switch it up.
Kids, adults, the kids and adults that we're working with are often in controlled environments where they are you do what we tell you to do most of the time. So giving them any empowerment to control your actions can be a huge motivator to try.
Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. And now I don't even know, we're in some loop right now.
Here,
There's me, inspire, don't require.
Yeah.
I will go over this slide really briefly. I was observing one of my students in the classroom, and the teacher was doing flashcards with him. It was like, what is it? It's a cat. It was really basic. And my student started having a lot of behaviors. He ended up like flipping the table. Never saw that from my student before. So I was like, wow, like he's really not happy here. And I'm convinced it was because it was the most boring thing that she could have ever asked him to do, like labeling pictures. He knew all the vocabulary, and it was just like, So I left I left the school, and I started thinking, like, what inspires any of us to communicate? We're not saying the car was driving down the street. Hey, guess what? The car was driving down the street. No one's saying that. They're coming into work being like, oh my gosh, I saw the craziest accident earlier today, right? We're talking about things that are shocking and weird and gross and funny, right?
Poop.
So we're talking about poop, exactly. So it's like we need to be thinking through that lens when we're educating individuals on how to communicate and what they could communicate about. One of my favorite things to use is GIFs. Has anyone ever used GIFs in their therapy or the work that they're doing? Raise your hand if you're a GIF user. Oh my gosh, you guys, game changer. Go to giphy.com. It's GIPHY.com. So I'm sure you guys all have individuals with, specific curiosities and interests. Plug in those interests, Paw Patrol, caterpillars. I'm thinking about all my students and all their very specific interests.
Elevators.
Ceiling fans, exactly. Plug it into Giphy, and now all of a sudden we have animated images that are super novel. It's like a giraffe eating popcorn, a pink elephant on a trampoline. They've never seen it before. They're interested in it. We're all interested in it. Think about how many GIFs we send to our friends, right? Our family, our partners. We're like, hey, let me communicate with a GIF right now. Like, using GIFs is a game changer. And again, it's interesting. They haven't seen it before. So it's not just like flashcards. We're like really thinking outside the box. You're in a classroom and it's circle time and we're talking about the weather. Pull up a GIF that has like a crazy torrential downpour to talk about rain, right? Instead of just like the little basic images. We're like, it's rainy out, it's sunny, right? Let's make it fun and engaging. And this is the kind of stuff that we can teach our teachers, our paraprofessionals. We can give those types of ideas to get our kids more excited to learn how to communicate.
Which sort of brings us to the activity just before break here. So what we want to ask you is, let's ask this first question. Any given student, think back to when you were in school, or maybe your own kids, they're at the end of the day, they come home from school, or they're driving home with you, or whatever, and you say, what happened at school today? What do they say?
Yes.
Nothing. They're not wrong. There's nothing really novel or new or interesting to talk about, right? But when a deer smashes through the front gate of our high school and starts running around the halls, guess what we're talking about at dinner tonight, right? So it's our job in any environment to create those situations, right? Because on any given day, there is nothing really interesting. Yeah, we did math again, So we can create those environments. And that brings us to I like dressing up in costume.
Yeah.
I'm a costume guy. See, I'm Groot there. Won $500 at our Halloween.
It's pretty. Did you make that?
I made that out of tree
Out of
bark.
real wood?
Yes.
It's really
I
impressive.
am Groot. Yeah. Okay, but here's the question to you. And I'll say this too. My very first speech language pathology class, Dr. John Onyefrak, University of Fredonia, he said, the speech therapist should be the craziest person in the building because that's what gives people the motivation to talk. They're going to talk about the wackiness, If Rachel came in one day and she had a big streak of blue paint on her face, I'm going to be like, Rachel, what's up with the blue paint on your face, right? So what are some of the wackiest things you've done with the clients you work with the students you work with? Let's share some ideas, some inspiration just here before break.
And put it in the chat for all of our Zoomers. Tell me something crazy.
I don't know how crazy it is. I should just keep one of these.
It's true. Should be right up next to you.
I don't know necessarily that it's wacky or crazy, but I like to take my kiddos that I work with during the summer, I like to take them to the mall, and they do a lot of people watching, where you think that they are oblivious to the world, but you get them in the mall and they're watching all these people go by, and you can see the different expressions on their face, and it gives an opportunity to use some of that communication.
Commenting. You're commenting on what you see out there in the environment.
Love it.
Exactly. All right. Awesome. People watching. We talk
I
about
love people watching.
I've been working in teletherapy the last couple of years, before COVID even actually. But I will sometimes put a mask on before, like an actual mask on my face, and then I'll come onto the screen and then just act like nothing's wrong.
Yes.
And
like a
wait.
Mardi Gras mask or a
Yeah,
Halloween mask.
like
sort
a
of.
dinosaur mask, something that my kids have. I'll put it on. And
Yeah.
And then just wait and see.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Love it.
Christina says, I have a couple of wind-up toys that poop jelly beans.
That's
Yes.
amazing.
I know that, reindeer. Right?
I like to trip or spill something on myself.
I do
Yes.
that. I do that just naturally, unfortunately.
I let a kid, and I don't want to say actually drive a car because that's not what he did, but I actually let him drive the whole entire session one time when we were together. It was all up to him where everything we did, and he felt really cool about
Love
that.
it.
And we ended up going to Flathead Lake and walking around inside the lake, and trying to get whatever was at the bottom. And he really enjoyed that. His mom was totally on board with it, and he just was tired of counting to 10 at school, and they didn't think he could do more. And he was a brilliant kid. So
Love
Yes.
it.
Let the client lead. Follow their lead rather than us dictating what they have to do. Heather says, crazy squirrel videos. Heather, I feel like we need a link.
I know. I think you need to pop a link in the chat.
So we were just talking about this, and one of the things that sometimes I do, and I think it's just because I'm forgetful, is a lot of times the kids will come into my room and they'll be like, "Oh, Miss Deech, you told us that we were going to do this last week or whatever." So I'll have them like be the detective and be like, "You guys have to stay on top of me. Like if you can't remember, like I'm not going to be able to remember." So we do that a lot in my room.
I love it.
I love it.
Yeah. I
Calling out
forget.
your
I'm always
mistakes
doing
or
that.
what you forget.
Yeah. I'm actually forgetting though.
Yeah.
And they're like, "We already did this."
They love to correct you. Suddenly
Yeah.
you become the most forgetful person on the planet, right? Yeah.
I like to use objects like incorrectly because our kids are often being corrected all the time by so many
Yes.
people in their life.
Yes.
And it gives them the opportunity to correct me and
Yes.
feel really confident.
Yes.
Yes.
I love that. I love that so much.
This is kind of related to Chris's theme today, but I know that a student was really motivated by bodily functions, so I just put fart sounds on my phone just
Love
to
it.
see what they would do and make.
Farting is always funny.
Farting is
funny.
always funny. I also, have you guys ever used the app Peppy Bath 2? You can legitimately put a child on a toilet and make them poop in the potty, and it makes a farting noise. And it plops in, you can flush it, you can wipe, you can do everything. So if you have kids who are obsessed with poop, Peppy Bath 2.
It's not that crazy, but I used to make up like one of my clients was really motivated by dancing, so we had like a special celebration dance when she would get information that she wanted out or correctly, and it kind of looked like this. It was like, "Oh yeah, oh yeah," and so then her mom was saying like at home, when she would get out the communication efforts she wanted, she'd just start breaking out and dance.
Yes. Yes.
Love it, love it.
Motion is a huge way to remember things. So
Yes.
more movement, less sitting, more movement. Yeah.
This just popped into my head, but an idea for when you're working with individuals who maybe aren't as motivated to initiate, and you're kind of in the initial stages of AAC. I have a kid who his mom does this specific yay, and we literally recorded mom's voice into the AAC system, and like he had never initiated on the AAC before, and when we programmed that in, he was just like, "Oh my gosh, like I have access to mom at all times." And so anyway, like sometimes you have to think a little outside the box when you're thinking about, especially emergent AAC use. Programming things like that, especially for young kids, can be really powerful. So yay and, oh yeah, like I can see those totally being in a
Fringe
communication
vocabulary.
system. Exactly.
It's fringe vocabulary. Two others real quick before break is Anna says, I speak in slow-mo at the beginning of every session with one student, right? How fun to do that. And K-Bet says, use of a cartoon video, assess student comprehension, watching the adjectives and forms of expression throughout the cartoon. Students love to watch cartoons and participate with you, them teaching you about the cartoons and their interests. So I could not agree more. All right, so it's 2:30, which is break time. So we'll come back at 2:48-ish.
Before we go to break, I just want to remind everyone there are a ton of skip slides. So we're talking all about, tools that you could potentially use. These are all skip slides. So these are like our favorite tools. So it's going to take you a while. There's a lot of them. But just know that there's tons and tons of resources in this slide deck that we're just not going to have a time to go over today.
We knew we wouldn't. They were skipped beforehand.
We always skip them. We actually never go over these slides.
We planned to just skip them.
All right. Let's take a break and then come back. What time?
All right, everybody. We're going to bring it back. We're going to talk about selection in about 15 minutes, and then we're going to talk about a big section. The last big section is going to be coaching, and with some follow-up Q&A sort of stuff, hopefully. Okay? So in coaching, we usually take 2 hours. We're going to condense it down to an hour. But some people had questions about the selection process for kids, adults, everyone in between. So we want to talk about the selection process. So what does the selection process look like, right? So many people would maybe be familiar with this sort of system, this sort of process, where, okay, we think a kid or a person needs AAC. So what are we going to do? We're going to go get somebody who knows about AAC. They're going to come and they're going to do some sort of assessment or evaluation. They come in, so now it's an outside person maybe coming to do an evaluation in this environment. They're going to maybe try 3 things. Like, I'm going to try a Go Talk, I'm going to try LAMP, I might try Proloquo, something like that. And then I'm going to see which one works best. And then I'm going to, from there, I'm going to pick the one that seemed to work the best for the student. Does that, or for the person. Does that sound about right? Yeah, how about chat? Does that sound about right? This is often predicated on an insurance-based model, and we don't necessarily have to stick with it, especially in schools or in other places. We can develop a new way. Why? Because there's some problems with that. Think about the motor planning. If I pick, here's the problem number 1. I've decided I'm going to do an evaluation with Jessica. Jessica's the AAC user. I have somehow decided that this thing, item number 1, is going to be your first trial item. What was my thought process why I chose this as the thing to give Jessica first to try? Did I have any rationale behind it, or was I just sort of picking something out of the air? Yoink, here, Jessica, try this. If I do have some sort of rationale, then why wouldn't that rationale just be the thing we try, Jessica? Meaning, this is the thing we're going to use, and I'm going to teach you how to use it if I have some rationale behind it. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, all right, I think maybe I'm not really sure if it's, let's say we've been talking a lot about Proloquo and LAMP, so we'll just stick with that. Let's say I'm not really sure if it should be Proloquo and LAMP, or LAMP. Which one should it be, Proloquo or LAMP? I don't know. Here, randomly, I'm going to give you Proloquo, Jessica. Now, the next question I have to ask is, how long does Jessica get it? A week? 2 weeks? 3 weeks? In Virginia, we have these things called snow days. You get those here in Montana? I bet you do. No. Okay, but if people are out sick, right? Or whatever, does that count or does it not count in the trial? What if the speech therapist was sick? Who's teaching Jessica in the first place? Or who's teaching Anastasia, who's actually working with Jessica, how to do this? Did you get enough training? All of a sudden, all these questions come about why was this the tool that was selected first? How long was it selected? And what were the supports around the selection? Problematic. And then the third problem is we've already talked about motor planning. So Jessica, we've been practicing this for 2 weeks. We've been working on Go and showing you Go. Okay, we got some data now around Go and how Jessica does with Go. Let me pull that away. Give you LAMP words for life. All right, let's see how you do with Go. Well, it's a different place with a different system, right? With a different, right? So we already know from motor planning, you're going to be like, where is Go? I learned Go in this place. Now I got to relearn it. So likely, whatever system you did first will probably do better in the trial than the second system. So all of that system is really problematic, and we don't necessarily have to stick with it. Maybe there's a better way, and that better way is displayed up on the screen. So this is called the SET framework. It was developed by Joy Zabala, and essentially what you do is you bring the party together, every important stakeholder. So private speech therapist, public speech therapist, parents, student if possible, the teacher, the other professional you might be working with, whoever the team is that's going to be selecting. And you want as many members as possible. And you say something like this: tell us about the student. Your role in that position, a role in that position, is to become a facilitator, guiding the questions. So tell me about the student. Well, what do you mean, tell me about the student? What's their ability like? What's their access method like? And what can they do? You can ask some facilitating questions. And as the conversation starts, you've been in IEP meetings or other programming meetings where you're talking about clients or students. The conversation starts, and you just put responses in the right bucket. So you might put a response about a student's ability. Well, they speak Spanish at home. Okay, that's something about the environment. They speak Spanish at home. We ask them all the time, and they seem to really motivated about working on the coffee cart, let's say, right? Okay, it's a task. We want them to be able to communicate on the coffee cart. They have cortical visual impairment. Oh, that sounds like an ability about the student, and we put these in buckets. But all of this information then be sifted into these different buckets, and you'll note the line that says student, environment, task, then there's a line, because we use those three buckets to then figure out what's the right tool. And the way we do that, just sliding to the next slide, is by putting it onto a table. It's just a simple table, where the first column in the table is the needs. So, okay, we said the kid has cortical visual impairment, so maybe we'd be looking at high contrast. So that might go up there, needs, high contrast. We said the student has speaking Spanish at home. Let's put that up as a need. It needs to be at an English and Spanish version. And then the list goes on from there. It's just looking through what we discussed through the student, the environment, and the task. Are you with me? Group decision. We're all together trying to figure it out. What are the needs? So we list as many needs as we can. One need that might go on there, or a consideration that might go on there, is what is the staff familiar with? Well, everyone here really knows pro loco. Okay, it's going to be a less of a curve. Maybe pro loco, that's something that goes down in the first column, staff familiar with X. The next column's over, option 1, option 2, option 3, and it could go on, 4, 5, 6. It's just a framework up there. It's not written in stone. Option 1 could be LAMP, option 2, pro loco, 3 is whatever the options we could consider. And then we just do a cross-reference. Well, does this one have Spanish? Does it have high contrast features? Now, when you come up here, a bunch of you come up here during the breaks and you talk to Rachel and I, we're doing this in our heads, right? And sometimes when you call an AAC specialist out to come out, they're doing it in their heads. And in that scenario, I often think of that like the Wizard of Oz, right? Someone's behind the curtain making decisions, and it's all invisible, and they come out with this magic solution. What you need is this badge of courage, you know? But what we want, that's one person putting all the eggs in the basket of one person. We want to democratize the solution, and that's why we're going to have this meeting we're going to consider the needs and then consider the tools, and then this becomes the decision-making process. Well, it looks like what's coming out of the wash here for this particular student that meets most of the needs is LAMP Words for Life. So why don't we, Jessica, instead of trialing that for 2 weeks, let's all get behind this solution. We're going to use LAMP Words for Life. We're going to do it in a school setting, my apologies, but in a school setting for a year. Why a year?
An academic year or a calendar year?
An IEP year, because we're going to review it at the annual IEP, right? So let's just it's going to be an accommodation that goes on the IEP, and then we always can make changes in between that year, but we want to think we're going to stick with it, if that makes sense. So that's the idea. That's the idea behind the selection process, is by making it a group decision. now it's not private speech therapist said it needs to be Lampert's for life, and school speech therapist says it needs to be pro lo quo, and so now we're fighting each other, right, and digging our heels in. The ABA therapist said it's got to be pro lo quo because it has the nouns on it, and they're pointing at nouns. No, we brought them in, and we had them part of the decision-making process, right? So they're part of the decision-making. Remember the decision-making process? As a team, we decided we weren't going to do that because we looked through these needs, and we said this was the tool, and this is how we were going to do it. Right? Now, I'm oversimplifying it, but that's the general idea.
When you get the whole team on board during the trialing and assessment phase of AAC, you're more likely to ensure success during the implementation side of AAC, which is where we know AAC fails. Because we can have the best system in the world that all the features match and it's so perfect, except if we don't have communication partners around an individual supporting that system, it's not the best system in the world. And so really incorporating the team is a huge part of getting to that implementation piece and being successful during the implementation phase. We can do that when we're like, hey everybody, come on in, join us in the discussion. So when it when it feels like it's not working or we have to kind of go back to the drawing board, it's like, hey guys, remember? We made this decision together. We did this all together.
Don't be mad at me, be mad at the paper.
The other thing is, if I as an AAC specialist come in and I'm like, here's my recommendation, then everyone looks at me like I am the expert in AAC. I'm the one to go to for all the questions that you have. I'm the one who made the decision. I'm the one who can solve the problems. And while I do help solve problems and I can guide and use my experience, really we're trying to build capacity within teams so that everyone feels empowered to make these decisions, to figure out roadblocks and troubleshoot them together. So it's really just kind of creating this team-based approach, and it starts with the selection period.
Hello? Oh. How do you know what all of your options are? That might be overwhelming, but there's so many different programs, and it's hard to know.
So yes, you have support that you can ask. What are the options?
Okay, support.
But here's the answer I would give. Do you subscribe to Amazon? Yes. Okay. So how do you search for things on Amazon? That's okay. Yeah. One option is like on Amazon Prime Day, you look at all the things, the deals, but that's like really shooting in the dark. Well, maybe I might find something. Typically, I bet if we were to go through your order history, there's a bunch of things in there that you already use, that you've done feature matching. Or if you went buying a birthday present for somebody, you've thought about, oh, what do they really like? Oh, my nephew really likes Legos and really likes Star Wars, and so maybe I should look at Star Wars Legos. And they're turning 8, so let me look in this age range, what would be 8? And you do feature matching when you shop already, right? So it's the same idea, is that once you have this first list of needs, now you can do Google searches and reach out to your network and say, instead of going, I don't really know what I need, help us. It's, no, I'm looking for something that has high contrast, Spanish, that can be accessed through switches, that, do you see what I mean? It narrows that search down.
I'll just do
eliminating things.
Quick plug. So you can always call MontCOMM. We can help you with that. I mean, I think you only have to call so many times before you are now know all the options and you're calling for quick questions. You know, so like I've narrowed it down, but here's a quick question versus coming in and needing to know everything. So we have an office in Billings and Missoula. And so that's a great way to just kind of get started. We always say, like, there's no way you could know every app that's out there, but we do our research and we stay up to date on what's out there.
You don't need to know every app that's out there. You can really limit the search. There's another question there.
So you guys touched on one of my pet peeves earlier, which is just anecdotal things on Facebook, on forums, really having to dig through the evidence. But I am wondering, I saw this recently, this comment, and I just want to hear from, I'm not an expert in AAC, so I kind of want to hear from the two experts that we have here in AAC.
Which two?
Don't put us on a pedestal. We're all experts here.
I guess I want to hear from my trusted sources. So I have training, I'm a speech language pathologist. And I just want to know, do we need in a school someone to come in and do feature matching, or can we do it as a team at an IEP meeting and say, let's go?
The second one.
Okay, so I don't need someone
Again,
who
boom,
has,
you're empowered. Do
okay,
it. Yeah.
okay. Because I just have heard, you know, there's been a lot of naysayers out there. They're saying, like, you cannot do feature matching if you do not have XYZ background in AAC.
No.
Okay.
There'll be tons of parents that will tell you that's bunk, right? That they do more research and they spend more time and they don't have a degree behind their name and they know more AAC than the speech therapist who went to a university that didn't have AAC as a course. Do you know what I mean? So no, there's no, and especially a school district, the IEP team gets to choose, right? It's not one person. So you do not need to bring in somebody else. That's what I would say. Is that pretty?
100% what I would
see me drawing that
I feel
line?
very empowered.
Good.
Thank you.
You should.
Good.
Because again, I mean, this is our view, but AAC is for everyone.
Yeah.
And yes, speech-language pathologists have more training in communication and language, but they don't necessarily have more training in AAC. Just like Chris mentioned, I mean, there's so many SLPs that graduate from their masters who have never had experience with AAC. So, you know, and what the problem lies when we have people who feel like they need to be experts in order to start trialing AAC, then we have students who are waiting to have access to communication for as long as it takes to get an AAC specialist. I don't know about Montana, but there's not a lot of AAC specialists out there. There's a lot of wait lists for AAC assessments. And you know, we can start trialing technology. Also, as an AAC specialist, if I come in to do an assessment, but you've already been trialing LAMP Words for Life for 4 months and have all this beautiful data and have all these specific questions for me, I'm excited. I'm like, yeah, I'll answer your questions. He's doing great. Tweak a few things. We're rolling.
And a great rationale by why you chose it in the first place, right? If there's a terrible rationale about why you chose it, then that's a different story. But all right, one last thing, because with selection before we move on to coaching. A common question, it was in the Padlet, we saw it in the chat here, some people had mentioned it. Okay, you talked about modeling, Chris and Rachel. I am in a room with adults or with kids, and this person has LAMP, and this person has Proloquo, and this person has Touch Chat. How do I do that? How do I model on all those, right? Well, you do. I mean, you have different, you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to teach them how to do it, and one of that ways is modeling. That said, in the selection process, again, one of the considerations might be what's coming through the wash the most. If you look at all of your assessment data, what's on the screen is this table for an individual. You're doing individual feature matching. But what if you took the last 3-5 years worth of data you have of doing these feature matching, or even the individual assessments that if you haven't been doing this process, you've got individual assessments, or however people got their stuff, you could make a list of what the tools are. Are they all coming out equal, or is there something rising to the top? I already heard a little bit here that LAMP is a little bit more known in Montana. That LAMP Words for Life is a little bit more known than some of the others. Am I seeing some head shakes? Yeah. What do you think, chat? Is LAMP a little bit more known in Montana?
I feel like I've heard LAMP and Proloquo to go.
Are the two?
There was a recent LAMP training.
So that maybe elevated things. So this brings us to this other idea, which is what if we applied the same table but thought of it to the masses? So we said there's no one size fits all. It's one of the first things we said. Shauna, was it you sitting in that chair? Yeah, in the morning. No one size fits all. And I said, that's true, but maybe there's a one size fits most. Maybe, rather than waiting and doing an individual feature matching for all of these kids that could be using something right away, we said in our institution, in our place of learning, in our group home, whatever, we start with this. We start with, in this case, it sounds like maybe LAMP or Proloquo might be coming through the wash the most. And then we tweak from there, because what Shauna said is so true. It's not going to be the right solution for everybody, but we tweak from there. In the same way that I bet during the pandemic, a lot of the students that you work with got Chromebooks. Did you get Chromebooks? Did they work for everybody? Kids with visual impairments might need a bigger one, right? But everybody got a Chromebook, and then we tweaked from there. Right? So that's the idea behind the other thing that was on the Google form, which is the specific language system first approach, which is don't do an individual assessment for every kid. Start with this thing that this is our tier 1 support for everybody, and then we tweak. We might do individual feature matching meetings for individuals that we know that's not going to work for. Cool? This helps you build a culture around a particular tool. It removes like, oh, I got to learn Prolo and LAMP Words for Life and maybe Cough Drop and maybe Touch Chat and all in one classroom. And how do I do that? Now, get good at one. Get good at these principles: aided language stimulation, descriptive teaching, least to most prompting. Those are universal across all the systems. Let's focus on those skills, coach those skills, and then when a new system comes along and you have to implement, oh man, I'm getting a kid that moved in here from Virginia because he was with Bugay out on the East Coast that has Touch Chat. Oh, Bugay, what did you do? Why does this kid have Touch Chat? Don't you know where a LAMP? No, you know descriptive teaching. You know aided language stimulation. Now it's just a matter of learning where the words are on this system. Right? Make sense? Maybe not, but is he feeling it?
I think the reality is oftentimes we're doing this naturally, but we feel really guilty about it. We're like, oh, like I know Prolo to go the best, so I'm just going to try this. And assuming the system is robust, that's the key here. The system is robust. It has access to grammar and a keyboard and all the things. Core language. It supports motor plannings, like all these things that
got the core themes.
It's got core themes. Assuming that is true, most of these systems are pretty similar and can work for our individuals that we're supporting. So I feel like when we aired this episode, we have an episode all about the specific language system first. We have subsequent episodes now.
Multiple.
So,
and a blog post.
Yeah, and a blog post on our website, talkingwithtech.org. So anyway, when we aired this episode, it was like so many people reached out to us. Some people were like, absolutely not, individualized only, like very harsh no to that. Many people, though, were like, thank you. I was feeling so bad that I was only using LAMP, or I was only using the system that I was the most familiar with. But the reality is, using a robust system, whichever that system is better than not doing anything, right? So getting our kids access and our individuals access sooner to AAC is ultimately the goal. And we can tweak from there. If that system doesn't work, then we have the tools to reach out to people that know and to get access to the resources that we need to further customize something that might not be working.
I'm just going to add, if teachers know how to program it, it will get used.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, truth.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Teresa. Right, we'll wait for the
mic.
And then there's one final point before we make coaching.
I'm so glad that you're talking about this. And when we first started MontCOMM, I think some of the discussion around that, I think we used it up.
That's a good sign. Lots of interaction. Our mic runners are really getting a workout today. You guys have been on it.
So one of the thoughts around MontCOMM was to start trying to develop AAC knowledge in the state and how we can get training out to people. And it was a little overwhelming thinking of all these different systems. And could we come up with a system that we could all kind of learn? And there was a lot of pushback about individual, whatever. And so it's really great to hear that, and I'm just going to plug that this past year we started the Aac Town Halls, where we're trying to get everybody together so that we, our school district we've used Prolo a lot. I think we are starting to move a little bit more in the direction of LAMP. One of the things that I love about it is that you can project it on a whiteboard. And that way, a teacher isn't trying to do all those different things. But we have so few resources in our state that the more that we can all be doing the same thing, the easier I think it would be for all of us. So I'm just plugging that.
Love it.
Town halls are coming back, right, Molly?
Town halls are coming back.
Woo!
All right, one last thing Rachel hit on. Thank you, Teresa, for that. And that is when things are not working. When things are not working, immediately the first knee-jerk reaction must be the system. Oh man, we picked X, and X is not working. Let's get Y instead, right? And when Y is not working, let's get Z, whatever the tool might be. And that is often the image that you see here, which is a bunch of people jumping off a cliff because it's the simple solution is to pick a different tool, but that's the wrong solution, right? Changing the app is the wrong solution. Almost always, if it's robust, if you went through a selection process where everyone put the needs together and figured out what the needs were and made a group decision, then what's probably not working is the supports around it, not the app. You might expect some plateaus. You might expect a little backslides. You're going to want to be like, oh my gosh, maybe we picked the wrong thing. No, let's think about it. Does someone need more coaching? Man, how much can we foreshadow coaching?
I know.
Does someone need more coaching? Do the parents need more support at home or different support at home? More is not always the answer, but different might be. Are we using our technology to support us, like video modeling and asynchronous trainings that we can do? There's all these supports that we can put in place. Look to the supports. Are we doing explicit instruction? Are we modeling? I bet you there's not a lot of modeling going on. That's often the case. Are we doing least to most prompting, or are we prompting all over the place? Look at those supports first before changing the app.
And one of the biggest ones, are we finding motivating things for individuals to communicate about? Because oftentimes I'm finding that is a roadblock. It's like, he doesn't care what color crayon he gets right now. Like, why are we focusing on colors? He really doesn't care, you know? So finding things that people care to communicate about. Go ahead.
Sorry, I keep talking, but I'm going to talk about the older population for just a second. One of the things that I find has been motivating is being able to communicate with people outside of their room and outside of their world. So figuring out a way for them to text using their communication device or speak over FaceTime. So for those older adults that aren't trying to talk to someone in the room, getting them, opening their world so that they can, and that might even be that they can listen to a text. They don't have to take their phone to someone to have it read to them, that you teach them how to listen, have it read out loud, but they're actually communicating with their device to people, their parents that live in another state.
Awesome.
Authentic purposes for communication. Yes, exactly.
Question?
Why is this not working?
No, you're just playing with your hair. Okay. Excellent. Okay, so let's move on to coaching, shall we?
Yeah. I think my mic's dead.
No, it's working.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Cool. All right, let's do this.
All right, coaching is definitely going to be universal across anywhere.
Yes.
So here's the thing. When we're working with AAC, who do we focus our intervention on? Are we focusing our intervention on the AAC user themselves, or are we focusing our intervention on the communication partners who would be interfacing with that AAC user? Right? Chances are, especially the speech therapists in the room, are doing a lot of direct instruction or a lot of direct therapy. You're working with the individual student. Is that fair? Adults, is that fair too? When I say adults, I mean, I know you're all adults, but the ones working with adults, you're working with the individual client, not the support staff around the client. A little bit with the support staff, but mostly the client. Okay, sounds like that's universal. Right? And clearly, we had to cut a bunch of slides, right? We could be here for 3 days and more, and we do a podcast for 5 years, and we're still scratching the surface. So there's a lot to learn here, right?
All right, so not only do we have to, teach communication partners strategies for communication, which all our SLPs in the house are familiar with, but we need to teach about following a child's lead or adult's lead, giving choices, all of these types of strategies. We also have to teach AAC-specific things, right? Like, what does it mean to attribute meaning? What is the prompting hierarchy? Just as some examples of all the things there are to teach, it takes a lot of time, which is, again, why we're all collecting here for a whole day, and we just scratched the surface.
But maybe we can be wiser about our time. Right? So these are, again, more skills, strategies. Let's get to how do we help other people acquire these skills and strategies, right? And we know that training can often be, I have an hour, I get Michelle to come out and I get to have one conversation with her and then she's off to the next. I saw the slide, the Google slide at the beginning where there's a parade around the the state that's going to be having. It's not a lot of time. You get a little bit of time training, right? So is there another way we could be looking at this on top of training, right? So yeah, training often looks like just, I got an hour, here you go. Good luck, Olivia, you've got the communication
Hope it
device.
sticks.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Oftentimes, too, that's because we're on to the next assessment because the waiting list for so long. So what if we could, again, adopt that specific language system first approach where maybe you didn't have to do so many assessments and you could spend more time on the improving the skills of others. So how do other places build skills, other disciplines? So there's some research behind this by Joyce and Showers. There's a bunch of different research on it. But culling it down to this one particular slide, it says the type of professional development, if you go to a professional development session where someone only gives you the theory about why something would work, then the impact on your knowledge is about 10%. We give you the test after this. You get to answer that test. You get your ASHA CEUs. Yep, it's about 10% is the impact on knowledge. But the actual impact on your skill, being able to do it maybe in a practice session, 5%. Oh, Chris and Rachel, they talked about self-talk. I think I could probably narrate myself, 5% in a practice setting. But in an actual game time setting with another person, the AAC user, zippy, 0%. Right? There's no follow-through. So, okay, what if we add on another layer? I'm going to give you the theory, but then we're going to give you the modeling. You're going to watch us do it. Or we're going to here's a video of somebody doing it. Okay, how does that change? Well, here's a video of someone doing that skill of descriptive teaching or parallel talk or any of the things we talked about. Again, spitting it back out on the test, about 30%. Much better by adding the modeling. But impact on skill in a practice session, again, a little bit of improvement by seeing someone else do it. But actual game time when you're in therapy or working with somebody, zippy. Right? Still not coming across. Now again, what you're seeing up here is research about skill acquisition for anything, not specific to AAC. We're tying it to AAC. So this is the same as like shooting hoops. You know, if I'm watching a video of somebody shooting hoops or throwing a football. Right? All right, theory and modeling. And now what if we said, all right, Olivia, pair up with Maddie, you get to practice, right? We'll get to practice a little bit in this setting. What is the impact there? Because we talked about the theory. You saw us do it. Now you get to practice it. Well, spitting it back out of the test, you're now at 60%. That's even better. And impact on skill. In another practice setting, they would be at 60%. But actual impact on practice, I got to go back and use that with students, only 5%. Shooting baskets in the game, only 5% when I just practice. The sweet spot, the money, is when you add this fourth component in. And that is theory plus modeling, watching someone else do it, or being with someone else who does it, practice, and then adding in this layer of coaching. So 95% impact on knowledge, spitting it back out on the test, 95% in practice situations, and 95% in actual working with clients, in game time situations. So this is what we need to add, is coaching. So, Molly, don't look at this slide. Okay? I finally found it after all these years. The scroll of truth. Training alone is not very effective. You need to add this layer of coaching in. Right? Don't be like the person in this who's throwing the scroll away. Embrace that fact. Let's talk about what coaching is. So, many of you may have learned how to ride a bike. Maybe this is a skill maybe you're familiar with, or maybe you helped somebody else learn how to ride a bike. How does one learn how to ride a bike? What are some things you need to help somebody learn how to ride a bike? Chat? Room? Maybe training wheels, some tools to help you. Patience. A helmet, another tool. Okay. Maybe someone running behind the bike, holding the back. Maybe saying encouraging things, like you're pedaling fast. I like how you're pedaling so fast. Others? A bike, Sarah, yes, right? You can't ride a bike without a bike, so you need a bike. And then the person to build confidence, right? And maybe the confidence in yourself that you can someday learn how to ride a bike. Yeah. Anything else? Time. Yes, it's not going to happen immediately, right? Practice. A sense of balance. But you can develop that maybe over time, right? With the right practice. Maybe someone, again, whispering in your ear.
I liked your very specific feedback. I like the way that you're pedaling.
Very specific feedback, yes. And I might suggest sometimes saying, oh, because you fell off the bike, right? So time, you fell off the bike. Oh, what are you going to do next time? What happened there? You fell off, what happened? Maybe asking some questions to get the person thinking about, yeah, I didn't pedal fast enough. I just got scared and I started to wobble, right? Okay, what are you going to do different next time? I guess I'll pedal faster and build my confidence because it was great. You were going, you were doing it. I don't know what happened there. Yes, right? Some reflective questions. Yes, so what we associate that with is, you said, helmet, training wheels, bike. Those are the tools. AAC stuff, you need the AAC, right? You need a tool. Then training would be like this concept that you can ride a bike. You've seen someone ride a bike before. I have an idea what it is. I've seen videos of people riding bikes. I want to do that. I've seen other kids ride bikes. I want to do that. I've seen other clients use AAC. I want to use AAC. So some training, some idea about what it is. And then, yes, the person behind you asking these reflective questions, giving you specific feedback, which is what the coaching is. One last thing, Rachel.
There's one more thing that you need to be able to ride a bike or do anything else, and that's the belief that you'll learn how to ride a bike one day with the right supports and the right teaching and the right coaching and all the things. And so we've talked a lot about belief and mindset today on purpose, right? Because that is what we need to believe when we're going into a situation with a complex communicator, is the belief that change is possible and communication is possible.
Note, training and coaching are separate. We're going to get into that.
Should we define it? What is coaching?
What is coaching?
What do you guys think? We were throwing this term out around a lot. I especially heard it a lot during the pandemic. Everyone was like, I'm doing parent coaching. I'm coaching communication partners. What is coaching?
Put it in the chat. What's coaching?
Well, providing feedback on what things are going well and, like you said, asking questions of what you think you can try differently.
Asking questions and specific feedback, okay.
I think of it as kind of going shoulder to shoulder, being there with them.
Shoulder to shoulder? Yeah. So
I heard encouraging.
Together. We're in this together. And doing some encouraging along the way, I heard someone say. Advocating, giving someone the tools, ideas, collaboration, parallel learning, relationship, working together, yes. All of this is all good stuff. We have a very specific definition to help put things in boxes for you to better understand what we think coaching, what coaching is. And a great way to do that is to define it against consulting.
So what do you guys think the difference is between these two?
Because, for instance, Lindsay says working together. Well, that would be consulting too, right? Or shoulder to shoulder. Is that consulting or is that coaching? How do we delineate these two terms? What do you think? Oh, okay.
I think of consulting as giving advice and recommendations and resources, but not actually like supporting implementation.
Okay, giving advice and resources, but not supporting implementation. Okay. It's working now? Okay.
I think so.
Awesome.
What's going on in the chat?
I think of coaching as giving someone the opportunity to try it and then being able to give feedback based on that. Whereas consulting, you're more talking about it instead of giving it a try.
Okay. Erica says support and feedback. Amy says coaching is showing how to do what they need help with. Consulting is giving information from them to consider. Just here, we could probably extend this conversation out. Look at all the different definitions between those two. No wonder there's confusion around what is coaching and what is consulting. What is training? We use these terms interchangeably, but what if we didn't? What if we really defined them explicitly? So that's what we're going to take a swing at.
Yeah. So the way we define is consulting is I'm telling you what to do. I'm saying, wait more, or don't ask so many questions, or use more commenting. Versus coaching is I ask you what to do. So we kind of hinted at this idea of reflective questions. Some of you guys shared, getting feedback. But coaching is really leading a communication partner to the answer on their own. And that's really the magic. The magic is when we can teach communication partners how to reflect on what just happened or the way that they're interacting with an AAC user. And they come to the conclusion on their own about what could be done differently next time. And so it's a different way to think about it, because I think we oftentimes just lump these things together. We're like, I'm teaching about wait time, I'm asking questions. But really, they're two separate things that we can kind of move in and out of while we're working with communication partners. And they both serve a very important purpose. And we can talk about, do we have, I don't know what slides we cut or not.
We'll just keep going.
Okay.
We should be explicit too and say we didn't make up these terms, consulting and coaching, right? Yes. The research that we showed before with the whole table with the numbers, that's how they define coaching, right? Mm-hmm. And there's whole books written on the concept of coaching. Jim Knight, cognitive coaching. We have a slide with a bunch of links that we skipped to strategies or to resources of people who have been doing coaching to build skills in other domains. We're just taking those definitions and applying them to AAC. Right? So let's skip this. Yes. So we talked about reflective questioning. So you mentioned, let's ask somebody questions. So you have an experience with a communication partner with AAC. You could ask them a bunch of reflective questions like, well, how did that go? What barriers did you see preventing achievement? All right, you had something in your mind how you thought that interaction was going to go. Now that it's over, what would you do differently? How would you change what you did before? What you might get as a response, someone might be like, oh yeah, we didn't wait long enough, or I jumped right in too early, because we talked about waiting and pausing, right? Oh geez, I was really, in my least to most prompting, I jumped over and I started pointing at the thing that I wanted them to say, rather than giving them more wait time or giving them a gesture first. But we asked them reflective questions. How do you think it went? What might you think, what might cause them to do what they did, right? These are all different questions. These two particular slides, people have told us are really powerful for them. They'll print them out. I have done it myself, print them out, especially when we're doing something remote, because we're not experts in coaching, right? You didn't get trained in how to be a coach, right? You didn't get coached on how to be a coach. So these are like little cheat sheets you can use to ask questions when you're coaching someone along.
One really easy one is the top one here. How do you think that went? Because oftentimes we're watching an interaction or we're watching a video with a family or another communication partner, and we just jump in with like, let me tell you what I thought. Let me tell you what I saw, right? So just conditioning yourself to always ask, how do you think that went? Is a really easy thing. And it's challenging to kind of shift into more of coaching, more reflective questions. But I found when I started doing coaching, just getting into the habit of asking, how do you think that went? I also coach my speech therapists that are on my team and students that we have, right? Like really getting into the mindset of asking questions before you provide feedback, because we're trying to stimulate reflection in communication partners and asking, how do you think that went? And sometimes it'll surprise you. You're like, wow, like, I didn't realize that you thought that, or I didn't even think about that. And you're really letting communication partners guide the support that you're giving them.
So you're asking reflective questions. Then the other thing is that if I were to ask Olivia a reflective question, Olivia is likely going to answer that question. So the next thing to do is then summarize the response. Okay, let me make sure I heard you correctly. Are you saying so-and-so? Or what I heard you say is blah, blah, blah. And when you summarize someone else's words, one of two things are going to happen. They're either going to say, yes, that's it, Chris. That's exactly what I'm thinking. That's exactly how I feel. Yes, that's exactly what I should do differently. And all you're doing is reiterating their words, right? I think I heard you say this. Or the second thing is going to happen, they'll be like, no, that's not it at all, Chris, that's not what I was saying. What I was saying is, and then they'll restructure it and get deeper into what the change is that they need to make. Does that make sense? The big advice here is to not give advice. And it's the hardest thing for all of us to do because we are in a service profession, right? Where we were probably trained to, you're the expert, tell me what to do, right? And what we're trying to do is say, no, we're not going to give you advice. We're going to ask you questions so you come up with the what you think the internal change needs to be.
And this is probably good advice for everyone in our lives, right? You know, with our kids and our parents and everyone we're interacting with, getting into the habit of not giving advice. Coaching is something you can practice with everyone in your life. It's not just when you clock into your job. It's really like, I've gotten better at coaching because I've made a cognizant effort to really ask more reflective questions, to not give advice with everyone in my life. So just, I think this is really something you can practice all the time, and that's how you really build the skill.
I'm so much of a better father and husband, I think, because of understanding coaching. How many people do you know is like the rock up there? You know what you should do is, that's the first thing to be like, imagine my teenage daughter, you know what you should do is, she'd be like, yeah, Dad, right. And when I ask for questions, well, I don't know, how do you think that went? What would you do to change to make it differently? Suddenly I'm not that like overbearing, like tell you what to do sort of person, or judgmental in any way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm a really big believer in building off of the strengths that our students or individuals with AAC are showing us, and the same thing goes with communication partners. It's a really vulnerable place to be in when you're embarking into some type of coaching relationship with someone. People feel like someone's going to come in and watch me do this, and it feels really awkward, and I feel like I'm not going to do a good job, and there's all this dialogue that someone plays in their head. The same way that when I was in graduate school, I felt the same way when my clinical supervisor was going to sit in on a session, right? I started feeling really nervous, like I'm doing it wrong, I don't really know. So, one strategy that you can utilize when you're embarking on coaching is first just establishing what it's going to look like. Because I think that oftentimes, especially as SLPs, when we start doing coaching, if we don't define what that is and what that looks like and the purpose of it, everyone's going to feel real confused. And we want to establish, this is what this is going to look like. This is why it's so important. This is going to be me asking you more questions than giving you answers. So I think just establishing that off the bat is really important.
Can I just jump in there and say it's super important, because otherwise it's going to come off as manipulative. Yeah. Right? It's going to come off as confusing. Well, why are you asking me all these questions? Oh, okay, we're in a relationship where this is the dynamic that we're setting up. So I could not agree more with that statement.
And then, obviously building a relationship with someone. So launching into a coaching situation is not always easy. Building trust, building rapport, making sure you create a safe space where a communication partner doesn't feel judged. An easy way to do that is starting with something that the communication partner did well. So, you know what I really noticed? He was so engaged during that activity. Or I love, the way you set up that shared reading experience. You did a really good job of modeling on the AAC there. That oftentimes when you start with that, it's like this wave of relief, like, oh my gosh, I did something right. Like, thank God I'm not just doing everything wrong. And then you kind of have an experience where a communication partner doesn't feel judged, doesn't feel like they're doing something wrong. And I feel like we share this, Chris, during this presentation. True coaching actually isn't giving feedback like that. It's not saying, it was great. It's really just asking questions, but we don't really buy into that.
Yeah, so with the research and what the people who write the books about coaching will tell you is it's a judgment-free zone. And that means judgment on a scale of it's bad or it's good. You don't give judgment either way. But what we find through our practice is to build the relationship so they trust you, there is a little bit of like, oh, I really like what you did there, That helps build you closer together. So we bucked a little bit there.
Yeah, you need to build confidence with communication partners because they ultimately have this narrative under the surface that's, I'm not doing it right, I don't know what to do, right? And that makes us feel daunted, overwhelmed, and we can't be as effective. Versus if we start building confidence in the communication partners that we're working with, and sometimes that means giving some praise where praise is due, we all of a sudden are, you know, empowering communication partners, and we're building a really strong relationship with them. We need another volunteer.
Last volunteer of the day. Excellent. Come on up. It's Megan? Megan. Okay.
I feel like we don't have chairs.
That's all right. We're going to stand here.
Okay.
All right. This is going to be like Asha. All right. Megan, you can hear me okay? Yep. Yeah. Can everyone hear Megan okay?
Can you hear me?
Can you see us okay, chat? All right. We're going to practice. All right. But you're going to have some sort of problem, right? Can you think of some sort of problem in your life or something like that? It can be related to AAC and work, or it could be something else, you know? Whatever you want, and then I'm going to try and coach Megan through that problem, okay?
Anything?
Anything you want.
Okay.
I'm here to help you. I'm your coach.
Okay. Our sink at home, the kitchen sink, is leaking really badly.
Oh, it sounds like your sink is really leaking. Is it bothering you?
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
What are you going to do about that problem?
Well, I don't know. We might call a plumber. We might try to fix it ourselves. I don't really know anything about the problem, though.
How are you going to decide which of those are you going to go with?
Well, I might look at YouTube first and see if I can find any good videos. But I'm not really good at following videos, so I might end up calling a plumber in the end.
You said we have a sink, so is there any supports you have that might help?
Yeah, me and my husband, we have a house together, and he usually fixes stuff, so, but he hasn't fixed the sink yet.
You say YouTube is not, you're not really good at watching videos? Tell me more about that.
I don't learn very well from videos. I need to like do it myself hands-on, so I don't know.
So, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is you don't really learn well from videos. Your husband probably is not a good support in that regard either, right? So what are you going to do? How are you going to get the sink fixed?
Well, I guess I'm going to have to call somebody, like a plumber, I guess, but I don't really know who to call, and it does seem really expensive, so.
So it sounds to me like you made a decision. Tell me if I'm hearing you right. At first it sounded like maybe you were going to try it by yourself, and now you've leaned through that, no, maybe I should just call a plumber and cut to it.
Well, when I say it out loud, I guess really that's probably my best option is just call someone.
And now you said you weren't sure a plumber's in the area, so how are you going to figure that out?
Well, I have a few friends who do own houses, so I'd probably start there and see if anyone knows a plumber, and then go from there.
Cool, cool. So just on this coaching experience, what would be your takeaway? What do you think you're going to do?
Gonna go call my friends and find a plumber.
We're gonna get that sink fixed.
Yay! Megan, you got to let us know if you get that sink fixed. And that's how it works, right? But that same thing when it comes to AAC is, let's say we watched a video together, and now we're reflecting on that video. So what did you see there? We had talked about doing a master PAL as and going slower. Okay, let's talk about that. Well, how do you think you went slower? You've established a goal that you want to go slower. What do you think? I probably was going too fast. What makes you think you're going too fast? Well, look right there, how I just jumped in, and I knew where all these buttons were because I've been practicing on the AAC. Like, you bring it out in somebody in that same regard by asking questions and asking reflective questions and making summary statements. One last little subtle thing, but it's not a huge deal. You're sitting in a chair with Megan. You might have seen that Megan was like leaned to the side at one point like this. As the coach, you might also try and match the physicality. So I was sort of like trying to match where you were. You're holding this, so I try to do this. Same thing in a seat. If someone's like this and they're leaned back, then maybe you sit back and lean back. If they kind of lean in, then maybe you lean in a little bit. And it's this subtle body motion that says, I'm with you. I'm here. We're together in this. You know, I'm here to support you.
All right, guys. This is the fun part. We're going to practice coaching. So you have to partner up, and if there's someone who doesn't have a partner, myself or Chris can be a partner.
And the idea here, and let's talk to chat for a second.
Yes.
Chat, now there's another slide coming up with Spider-Man. We may have skipped it, but the idea is that you can coach yourself. Think through a problem you're having and only ask yourself reflective questions. For the people here that are shoulder buddies, right, or if you're not a shoulder buddy, find somebody that's a shoulder buddy. And feel free to get up and move and find somebody here in the last 45 minutes of our time together. And the big thing, one person is going to say, here's my problem, and your job is to not give advice. You cannot, you'll notice I didn't say call a plumber, right? I didn't say why don't you go to YouTube, right? You cannot do that. That's the violation. You gave advice. You cannot give advice, right? So think of a problem, and then we're going to say ready, set, go, and then you turn to a shoulder buddy and you practice by you giving the problem and the other person coaching you through it.
Okay.
Can you think of a problem? Can you find a shoulder
We
buddy?
all have problems.
Go.
A universally shared experience.
Let's see here. Let's bring it back together. No, it's not going to work.
What?
Well, I was going to say big. Mac. I was thinking dipper for ice cream, but that's not.
Didn't work.
Yeah, okay. What'd you think? Let's talk about it for a second. Was it hard to not give advice? Yes.
Did people solve their problems?
You love telling people what to do. Yeah.
Did you guys feel like it solved your problems?
It may have solved their problems, but it caused more for myself. I'm a problem solver, and it's hard to get out of that.
Yeah.
Jessica says she's a problem solver, and it's tough to get out of that. Exactly, Jessica. And one of the reasons you're a problem solver is you work in education, right? Or you work in a service profession, and that service profession is often solving problems for others. People come to you for advice, right? And so what we're asking you to do is hard, and you've had no training or coaching on it at all. So this is your first foray maybe into this. That said, it works. It works for other people's skills and strategies, like in other disciplines. And then real quick, I'm going to tell you, we implemented this model across our school district. We did training. We picked the most salient thing in our need. We thought it's modeling. Most people in our school district didn't know about modeling. We taught them s'mores, the Jill Center Matt Baud. Remember, we had Master Pal up there on the screen. You could pick Master Pal, whatever. We taught them that in training sessions. We've had practices in like little practice rooms, and then people got 6 sessions where we came, where we videotaped them. What did I say? Videotape. Video recorded them. We video recorded them. We asked them to watch back. We asked them to reflect and reflect and reflect. We recorded them again, and we measured the first recording and the last recording and watched how much modeling they were doing increased. And it increased across our district at 16%. So that coaching model works. We also we measured student growth with a language tool called the COLE. It doesn't matter. We measured language of students, and we saw a 12% growth. So we know it works when you do it. And again, maybe you get a bigger bang for your buck than doing one-off trainings and not really be able to support them very well, because you're running off doing the next assessment to figure out what's the next best thing for the next person.
So for all of our Zoomers, hopefully you guys were practicing some self-coaching. But I want to share, the way that I got better at coaching was watching myself back coaching. And I do speaking events like this a lot. I share videos during those speaking events, so I have the privilege of watching my therapy back, watching my coaching sessions back. And still to this day, actually I just recorded I have a course called AAC Ally. I just recorded a new module of an assessment I did a few months ago. And literally in the recording, I noticed, I didn't attribute meaning there. I always teach about attributing meaning, and I redirected to a different word. And so, watching ourselves back is one of the most powerful tools. If we think about professional athletes, how does a professional baseball player or football player or basketball player get better? They watch their tapes back. They're analyzing their tapes and figuring out what could I have done differently with my form, and all of those things we can do. So using video is not only great for when we're working with communication partners and kind of slowing down an interaction, being able to pause it, ask those reflective questions, which is how I use coaching in my practice and how I work with families and other communication partners. But it's so nice to be able to, slow it down in video and have conversations about it. What, Chris, it sounds like you did in your district was recording people in real time, which is another thing that you can do, and another thing I do in my practice too, is recording that interaction and watching it back. I'll say sometimes people are a little weird about being recorded, so a really easy strategy is to say, let's use your phone, and as soon as this is over, we'll delete it. Like, it's on your phone, I won't show it to anybody, it's yours, delete it right after if you want, because sometimes people feel a little nervous about recording. But those videos are so powerful, and that's how we become better at anything. So watching ourselves back as educators, we can notice, oh, I didn't pause enough there, right? All these strategies that we're trying to teach. I didn't ask a question, I just jumped in, started consulting with someone instead of asking a reflective question. And then, I even watch back and I listen to something where I said, oh, I gave an idea or I did some consulting, and then I say, what could I have said here? I could have asked this question. So you can self-coach. You can become a better coach by actually watching yourself back.
Rachel mentioned how awkward it was, okay? So we implemented this in a school district that has, you were telling me yesterday, our school district has close to 85,000 students, right? Which is the population of Missoula. Right? Missoula's a little smaller than our school district. We have 90 speech therapists, and we did this with a bunch of teachers as well, right up till March 2020, and then we stopped for some reason. I don't know what happened in it. I don't know. But the speech therapists got all 6 sessions. Many of the teachers only got a handful of the sessions. That said, we asked them through a feedback form, hey, what'd you think about this experience, right? Because we knew this awkwardness. It feels awkward to do it. We're not trained in it. And can you just imagine how elated everyone was when I said, and guess what? We're going to come in and we're going to record you doing it, right? The skill that you just learned here, that people were not happy. But by the end, everyone saw their skills go up. And on this Google form feedback about the coaching experience, not a single person didn't like it. Meaning it was all positive reviews. Think of that, like 90 speech therapists all agreed that this was a good thing, that their skills got better. Whenever can you get 90 speech therapists to agree on anything, right?
Never.
So I know that it works. So I saw it in real life, right? So if it works for us, then it could work for you. Work for the parents, and it can work for the staff that you work with.
I'm going to share the text message, Chris, because I feel like, again, part of the work that I do with communication partners is through video. And, whoop, hold on a second. What's going on here? And I want to share this text message that I got from one of my clients. So basically the way it's set up in my practice is whoever I'm coaching takes a video of an interaction or a few videos, and then together on our call, this is all done remotely through telepractice, we watch it back together. And you can see here, mom is like, I realize afterwards that I'm putting a lot of demands on him. We'll take some more videos tomorrow. So when someone's sending you a video or knows that they're going to share a video with you, you better believe they're watching that video back before they send it or share it or show up with it. Like, this is the power of the coaching. She just coached herself. She just watched that video back, reflected on it, and said, I put too many demands on him, I'll send more tomorrow. And of course, my feedback is, that's the whole part. Like, that's the process here. So I want to share that because getting communication partners comfortable with sharing videos can be a really powerful strategy to encourage self-reflection. All right.
All right, final question to ask you here is this. Again, what is, before the pandemic, or really right now, it sort of doesn't matter, what was the percentage of time you were doing direct intervention with the AAC user? Just shout it out or put it in the chat. What's your number? AAC users, you did direct intervention, you worked with them. How much % of your time is spent working with them? 80, 90? I'm seeing a bunch of nods. Chat, you got it? Numbers for us? How much, what percentage of your time is spent working directly with the AAC user? Anyone else? 80, 90? You say 10, Teresa? You switch it around? Because you've adopted this coaching before?
Not all
Yeah. I mean working directly with a student as opposed to working with communication partners. Okay, cool. Other thoughts? 90, 80, yeah. Typically it's this. And so this is the pie chart that we created because this is the typical response, is that direct, we said maybe 95, 94, 95%, with a little bit of coaching, maybe a little bit of consulting, where we are training or teaching you something explicitly, right? But now, what if the big aha moment that we hope you have here in the last sort of statements before we open it up to questions is, what if it more looked like the draw for Uno card, where 25% was doing direct, 25% was still teaching something, consulting, I'm going to give you advice, 25% was coaching you through this new skill that I just taught you in the consulting, and then 25% is some hybrid version where it's like, I'm going to jump in and, okay, you watch me while I do this, okay, and let me jump back out. Now I'm going to give you some advice on how to do it, and then let's reflect on it. So you're doing it all mixed together in one session, right? What if this was the new way therapy or intervention looked? What, do we get a greater bang for our buck, for our time spent? Does this help when they're build communication partners skills across the board? What are your thoughts?
You guys feeling a little overwhelmed? Like, how do I actually do this? Seeing some heads shake, yeah. I mean, I think the best advice with anything, but especially when you're thinking about embarking into coaching, is find a communication partner that you feel comfortable with, that you have a good rapport with, and just say like, hey, I want to try out this new thing that I just learned at this really awesome training, and then just try it. And then what happens is that when you build your own confidence as a coach, you have a successful situation with someone else, then you can go to the classroom down the hall and say, I'm doing this really awesome thing with this other teacher or this other paraprofessional. I would love to try it with you. So, you know, the idea isn't we're going to completely revamp every single thing that we're doing. It's like, how can we start small, incorporating some of these strategies and incorporating some of this coaching into the work that we do? Because we know that the best indicator for success for an individual using AAC is how the circle of support helps that student or that individual learn language and learn how to use AAC. If we know that, then we have to figure out ways to coach communication partners that actually stick, right? Not just teaching about these concepts, but actually getting them to reflect on what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how they can do it better, to constantly changing the way they are interacting with an AAC user to facilitate more independent, autonomous, intrinsically motivated communication. Drop the mic, drop it.
So now we'd like to spend the rest of the time doing right? This ends at 7:30, Molly? Right? I'm just kidding. Yeah.
We have 3 more hours.
7:30 Eastern time. We want to spend the rest of the time either answering questions or, Rachel, if we could put up that the takeaway slide, the dominoes there.
Yeah.
Right?
We also have some free resources down here at the end, but
yeah, don't miss those.
Feel free to check those out.
What do we got with the resources?
We have
blog you can subscribe to.
I have like tons of free resources, and I constantly send them out to my email list. We have Chris's amazing newsletter.
Yep.
And
this is
this one.
Our LCPS inclusive design blog that has an AAC tag, but do you guys like emails? Every Friday.
Who loves emails?
But every Friday we put out one paragraph with maybe a video or another resource all about inclusive design. Some of it is AAC, but some of it is beyond that. So we'd invite you to answer or to ask questions. And then also, if you don't have a question, we'd love for you to share either in the chat or on the Padlet, or just shout out. I'd really like to reflect for a second and share out an aha moment. What was a big takeaway for you? What was the thing that might resonate with you that you'll take and make a change moving forward? Daryl, let's start. I think Michelle's going to bring you the mic.
I'm not going to do the wonderful reflecting part of it, but I will ask a question. So one of the things as voc rehab counselors, like, we'll attend IEP meetings and do different things like that. But one of the things that I've seen is like the technology needs to stay at school. it would seem to be like what you're getting at is the technology should be going with the student. Should we have technology at both places? Should it just continually go back and forth? Parents being trained on utilizing this, anybody that's interacting with the student being trained on utilizing these things. What's your recommendations for all of that?
That's an easy one, yes. So like we said, every communication partner, the better. That was really the point of that Jane Corsten thing. If it's just the speech therapist that comes, then you won't get there. They don't have enough time. So we have to work on all the communication partners, maybe even hinting at this coaching, spending more time with the family, coaching them. Because how many kids do you know or adults you know, the adults that you work with, how many speech therapists have they had over the years, right? They could probably have an average of 8 to 12 different speech therapists between kindergarten or preschool through age 22. So who's the consistent force? It's the family. With regard to the device anything to add before I talk about devices? No. The device going home, we would strongly advocate that it goes home. The backup plan would be having 2 devices that mimic each other at home, but then what's the transfer process look like? Is it on the bus with them or something? So, because I have access to my language all the time, so that means everyone else should have access to their language all the time. We'd really get at the heart of why won't it go home, and let's dig into that problem. Again, is it a mindset thing? Is it a
school responsibility thing? That if we provide them with their iPad or their device, and it gets broken or something, then the parents are responsible.
It's not in school, right? So what Jessica said, if it breaks at home, then the parents are responsible. That is exactly against the law, right? IDEA is very clear that assistive technology is free. Once it's deemed necessary for a free or public education, if it's in the IEP, then that's free. So, yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah. IDEA. Helpful, Daryl? Was that helpful?
Yeah, very much so. Again, it's just exactly what was said there is the school responsibility. Like, we need to keep this here because it's a school purchased item and it needs to stay at the school for school purposes, kind of a deal. And that's, and that's where like Voc Rehab and other organizations, MontCOMM, and we have other resources to be able to purchase another device if we need to. But it seems to be the best course of action just to have it go back and forth.
Something else to really consider, Daryl, I think a lot of families have chosen this option is the red tape of whatever organization you're working with. It can be more cumbersome and more time intensive and more costly in time away from work or whatever. So it's, you know what, we're just going to figure out how we pay for it ourselves, you know. For an iPad, now maybe some devices still cost $5,000 or more, right? But an iPad with an app that you can get during sales time, many AAC apps go on sale in October and May. So these $300 apps now are $150, and for the price of an iPad. If it becomes a funding thing, it's a totally different thing than a mindset thing. Funding thing we can work with. We can talk to business partnerships. We can look for grants. We can get students involved. And how can we do fundraisers? There's all sorts of different ways to get past the money. But maybe parents say, you know what? Maybe it's better use of my time to just buy own personal device, and that's what's going to go to school and come back and forth. In the same way glasses go to school and come back and forth, or other things. Cool. All right. Other questions? Aha moments, moments of reflection. Chat, do we have any in chat?
Lots
Maddie,
going on in the chat.
Okay. Where do we start?
People like the consulting versus coaching I read. Let's see.
Tricia, starting with the full grid size and reduce my masking if necessary rather than reducing grid size. Yes, that's a great reflection.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tricia.
Please make my AAC consults a lot easier.
Crystal says, I will cut myself a break and feel better about the idea of something is better than nothing. I will also try to spend more time coaching communication partners. Right. I really love your advice as far as pick one person, Crystal. Who's your, that teacher or that professional? You'd be like, can I just try this with you? I'm not great at it, but can we just try it? Can we record a session? Maybe you record a session, we watch it together and coach on it. You'll grow and that person will grow. Morphemes.
I saw it. I knew you were getting excited when you read it. I also just love that Crystal said, I'll cut myself a break. I feel like we're so conditioned to feel like we're not doing enough. I think parents are feeling like they're not doing enough. And if you really, I feel like one of my secrets to being an SLP and working with this population of individuals is really just giving permission to do one thing really well and then do another thing really well, and then over time small moves like that add up to really big change. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed or you're working with a communication partner that's overwhelmed, how can you make it easier to digest? How can you make it a little bit simpler? That strategy alone can change yourself, it can change the people that you work with, and it helps people feel empowered, like, I can do this. I'm seeing success here, versus, oh, I have to do all the things and I can't do any of them right, and people just kind of shut down, which I think is a lot what's happening in schools and probably in the work that you do. So just small, bite-sized chunks, I think, is the key here.
Like the Grand Canyon, little molecules of water make this huge, giant structure change, right?
Exactly.
It wasn't a giant comet flying out of the sky.
Yeah.
A lot of people in the chat say the difference between coaching and consulting. There's a lot of that. So awesome, awesome.
Any other? Oh, yes.
Okay, I'm trying to think of how to phrase my question. So I feel like a big barrier in working in schools is the limited access to parents and the opportunity to consult and coach. And I was just trying to problem solve in my head how I would approach that this year. I work in special ed preschool and K through 8, and with population of kiddos with severe communication difficulties. And I was just thinking about the limited time that I have with parents and how I just want to give them all this information, which is obviously consulting, not coaching. And usually they really appreciate it, but I feel overwhelmed, they feel overwhelmed. And I was wondering if you have a resource that maybe lists I know you have to be individualized a bit, but a resource that lists the order of strategies that you might provide a parent to gradually work on, or just a flow chart of how it's easiest to work with parents when you're not in a private practice setting, when you have minimal time with them, and then I was thinking to myself, well, what if there was some way to not individualize everything, but provide a group type of email? Or I know you can't do that because you give away people's email addresses now.
You can BCC them.
But you could BCC them,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, is there a parent coaching thing like Canon Language? It provides parent coaching, and then as the SLP, you go to their home and provide coaching one-on-one after they've done the 6-week course or within that time frame. And so I was thinking, is there something for AAC at this point that would help provide a baseline background knowledge and not trying to piecemeal the education and then the consulting and coaching throughout the school year?
There's a lot to unpack there. You want to go first?
I have some ideas.
Okay, me too.
Sorry.
No, it's totally.
I feel like it would really help my school year.
Of course. We want to help everyone's school year, everyone's year here. Okay, so I feel like there's a lot to break down. One is, and this is something I've thought about in my own practice, right? I feel like, as an SLP, I never have enough time to do all the teaching and all the things. So one thing is, what can we automate? So asking ourselves the question, what can we automate? I actually have an amazing resource, Lauren Enders. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Lauren. She's a AAC All-Star, does a lot of speaking events like this. Lauren Enders actually made a PDF that has QR codes and videos. The reason I started my YouTube channel, which if you guys haven't checked it out, it's awesome. It's very parent-friendly. And the whole purpose was, how can I automate some of this process? I'm teaching about core words, I'm teaching about modeling, I'm talking about 3, big myths we hear when we're thinking about AAC. And so, figuring out ways to automate information and then customizing when you have the opportunity to be one-on-one with someone. So I think, as clinicians and educators, we can balance both of those things. And we can automate some of the process, but when I have FaceTime with a family, my first question is, where do you feel like you're struggling with the AAC? And that's where we're going during that call. Because if I can help a parent feel like, oh, the device is never around. I'm like, let's troubleshoot some ideas on how we can remember to get that device. Let's find one opportunity throughout the day that's happening every day, a routine, to have the device. So we're able to kind of do both at the same time. Yes, we have a lot to teach with AAC. There's a ton of really great resources out there. So figuring out ways to automate information alongside of taking that individualized approach so that you can get communication partner buy-in. Because if it's all, I'm just throwing training at you and consulting, it's not going to stick. Because it's like, well, I don't really know how to use all this information. That's where we can come in when we're with someone, face-to-face or virtually, and we're able to customize and help solve problems for them in their situation. Does that kind of answer your question? I realize it's easier said than done, but figuring out what can be automated and how can I set up supports for all of my AAC students, alongside of having conversations with families, because that really guides, at least when I'm one-on-one, that guides what I'm doing. Is what's your biggest challenge with AAC? Because really, I want to help solve problems so that you are like, Rachel, calls with Rachel solve my problems. Calls with Rachel make me feel like, okay, I got this, That's what I want the takeaway from my call to be. If I'm just like, and do this, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this, everyone's overwhelmed. Everyone's like, what do I do? I'm not sure. There's a lot of things that you just said. And I'm guilty of that too. Sometimes I'm like, that was information overload. But really customizing and automating what you can, I think, is really what I've done in my own practice and seen a lot of success. I'll add another thing to the Padlet, which is that PDF that Lauren Enders created for me. It's super useful, and it's a lot of my face, which makes me feel a little uncomfortable, but super helpful for families. Just send that with all of your students who you're starting with AAC. Here's some helpful videos to get started, and then you can customize from there.
Laura, quick question. It's March 2020. The school's shut down. We go to emergency distance learning. The next school year starts. What did your intervention look like?
I will have a hard time answering that question because my role completely changed the next school year.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, what I think a lot of people realized is we had kids that weren't going to be able to do direct therapy on a screen, right? So, but who was maybe sitting next to them is a communication partner, right? So we could do that. We saw a huge uptick in at least working with the families. Is that something you found here too? Is that the amount of communication with families went up during the pandemic? So with that in mind, it's like, well, how do we keep that ball rolling? Because now we go back to in-person learning. It's like, well, let's just get back to how it was. But how it wasn't working in the first place. So let's take what we learned from the pandemic, podcast too, but the pandemic, and let's roll with it. So the second thing is we have an episode on the podcast, I was going to point back, with somebody named Lindsay Payton Cargill. And what she talks about, she's from Ohio, was she did put parent groups together where all these parents came and they brought the communication device that their kids were using, and then she just said, okay, you can't talk. You have to, and there was some that were like, I think she even had some beverages out.
I was going to say, there was wine,
I think there was some, might have been some wine or something.
This is fun, I want to come.
But whatever it was, whatever the experience was, they got to experience and practice on their own. And then the last thing I would say is, I really like Rachel's advice. I would say in the school district, we picked one salient thing. So for the parent that's like, I don't know what my biggest obstacle is, suss it through by some talking. What are some of your obstacles? Again, reflective questions until you come on it, and then you can jump to advice. Do you mind if I give you some advice? What I think might really help you is modeling. So let's practice modeling, and let's stick with this for 6 months or so. Let's practice modeling. So they might not know what to say, so you can give them advice at some point. Is that helpful?
One more idea. I have, if you go to my email list and you get the free resources, there's an AAC coaching bundle. And I think I shared it actually in the slides. Remember when I shared the AAC specific skills? That's in there. Another idea is having a different theme each month. So 1 month it's modeling for every family. 1 month it's attributing meaning. 1 month it's fill in the blank. I think that could be a really useful way to structure it if you want some kind of structure around what you're teaching and how you're teaching it for the automated stuff.
All right, everybody, I guess that's the end.
How? We're done?
You want to keep talking? You want to just extend this for another couple hours?
We
It'll
do
get
have
cooler
one
eventually.
last request.
We have one question.
Which is, if you have a great idea for where we should go to dinner tonight, feel come up afterwards and be
Where-
like, you need to try. We went to Panko's last night, so is Panko?
No,
Plank?
Plonk.
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 Plonk. We went to Plonk. Panko's like, yeah, no. We went to Breadcrumbs yesterday. Yeah.
I also love
Camino.
margaritas.
Thanks, Lisa.
So, margaritas.
Thank you, chat, for participating along. Appreciate it. Caminos. Everyone say Camino.
Camino. Camino.
Zutai.
Done.
Okay, that was their last request. I have 3 more last requests. You were so close to getting out
So
of here. So close. Obviously, we have an evaluation form that we would ask that everyone please spend some time filling out. It's short and sweet, I promise. I will also email this out next week. I am not promising to do that tonight or tomorrow. We used this information. The #1 choice on our question of who should we bring to Montana next was, guess what? Rachel Amadel and Chris Bouguet. So we said, yes, we will bring them both. And so that was information from last year's eval.
Awesome.
And we need that information again. Let us know how we did. Let us know how we can serve you better across the state. That is what we're here for.